Та ми готові всіх вас сватати, вже полягло, і все більше шлекуємо, то для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home, бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome back to day 129 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, but I just want to let y'all know that in case if y'all are running into any kind of a glitch or an error right now in y'all's end trying to send messages on the live chat, we did endure a DDoS attack through the countdown of the stream. Our stream was throttled down to 0 while Matthew and my internet was perfectly fine. We remained on the Discord call, meaning that someone was attacking our stream directly once more. But of course, we made it through as the stream is still running and we are still, of course, on the show. So just letting y'all know, just in case y'all are having that problem, try and refresh. And if it continues to persist, unfortunately, there's not really much we can do on our end. So just try and bear with us tonight if that does continue to be a problem, because we try our best to keep the streams alive. So with that, we're, of course, going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news, and let's get right into the schedule, which is actually pretty devoid of international news today, save these two pieces. We'll actually be starting off here in our location unknown news tonight. We have 7 pieces of news, and once we cover those pieces of news, we'll then move on into Kharkiv, and we'll also cover the Kharkiv news. After that, we're going to move down and also cover the Izyum and Lysychansk area news. And then after that, we're going to start moving towards Severodonetsk and pretty much the northern Donbass, the remainder of it. But before we get there, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat in between Lyman and Lysychansk. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the Severodonetsk area, as well as the Luhansk region as a whole. After we cover all of that news, we'll then be moving on down towards the Donbass area. But before we get there, we're of course going to answer another 3 questions from the chat. We'll then cover all of the Donbass news, the Southern Front news, the news we got from Odesa, also the Snake Island news. We have a little bit more news coming out of Snake Island, and then finally some Polish and British news. And then we'll be rounding out our stream for the night by talking about the speech from President Zelensky, and then that'll be the end of the news segment, and we'll move on into the question segment. So kind of a misspeaking there on my part. It's not going to be the end of the stream for the night. It's going to be the end of the news segment on the stream, but of course, we'll answer everyone's questions who send in a super chat, and we'll also answer as many live chats as we possibly can. So, we have a pretty big news night tonight. We have been getting a little bit of unfortunate news from the Lysychansk area, but we'll be covering that here soon. So without further ado, let's get straight into those location unknowns. Starting off today, our first clip actually comes from the Russian perspective, where we can see a Russian infantry fighting vehicle get slammed and then the crew bails out. When you see the video here, the armored personnel carrier is moving down the road. We can actually see a decent amount of vehicles here, and then the infantry fighting vehicle gets slammed from the side, and the crew here in this clip, you can see hopping out and running off. We don't know if that's all of the crew members that were in there. Some of them may be left inside and may be dying. We're not entirely sure, but it did look like the Ukrainians scored a pretty solid hit on this tank, as the crew pretty much came to that conclusion themselves. So of course, great to see, and it's wonderful to know that the Ukrainians are still knocking out equipment across the front. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see some boom goes the dynamite. This may be the largest explosion we've ever seen come from a tank, as the tank didn't even exist after the explosion was done with. And so, here's the video. We can see the tank having a little bit of a smoke right there, and then all of a sudden, it goes up in flames. We can see a turret toss right there. The form was good, execution not so much. I would give it a 4 out of 10 in terms of height. Golly, if you were standing around that tank when it exploded, I'm sure you would be deaf by now. And you can see that there's actually nothing left of the tank either. It's now become just a mass of bent and turned metal. So, with that, a crazy video. We've rarely ever seen an actual main battle tank blow up like that. Usually it's a Mista S that blows up in such a fashion. But that's one of the few times we've seen a main battle tank explode like that. An incredibly interesting video, and great to see that the Ukrainians are still inflicting the pain and the hurt on the Russians. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see another turret toss competition. This is actually on a second tank today on a road, and we can see that the tank gets hit from the front, and the turret goes up into the air. And I would say that one went a little bit higher. It looks like it got some more airtime, so I would give that one a 6 out of 10, but it still doesn't match that 300-meter high. I believe it was a 300-meter high or a 100-meter high. Might be getting the figures wrong there. But turret toss that occurred about a month ago, where that thing literally almost went to space. But still, great to see the Ukrainians knocking out tanks. And this is very rare. We hardly ever see tank turrets flying, and today we've seen 2 of them. I believe these are the only 2 we'll see on the news tonight, as far as I remember. But man, those Russian crews did not have a good day. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians destroying Russian positions. And so, here's the video. We can see the Ukrainians taking a good look at the Russians. We can see them there in their trenches. We can see the Ukrainian drone operator that is about to probably take these Russians out, or at least call in the artillery that will do that job for them. Of course, extensive trench works, and good job to the Russians. They finally cracked open a manual. Apparently someone in their unit finally knew how to read, and they finally learned what all those zigzag lines in the manuals were, and it was showing how to build a trench. But as we can see that the Russians are finally starting to build trenches in a zigzag, so that way shrapnel, when an artillery shell blows up inside of it, actually gets evenly dispersed. Now, the Russians on this side of the line, apparently they didn't get the memo about building the trenches with some zigzags in it. It looks like this group, of course, has nothing but illiterates in it, because they once again built the trench in a perfectly straight line on both sides of the road. And just to recap again why it's important for them to have zigzags, if a bomb is to drop right into that trench right now, the shrapnel is not going to go in all directions. It's going to go in 2. It's going to go down to the north of the trench and the south of it. And so all of that shrapnel that would have been going in a 360 direction is going to be going in a 180 direction from one side to the other. So not necessarily the best thing, and that's why you always want to have breaks and sharp turns in your trenches, so that way shrapnel doesn't travel down the length of it and kill everyone. And we can see that the Russians are about to learn this lesson the hard way, if anyone's even left alive to learn from it afterwards. We can see some Ukrainian tanks here firing at the Russians. And we can now see some of those shells landing and hitting very close to the Russians. It looks like some of them might have been right on top. We can now see the Russians abandoning their positions. A bad move, especially when you're running out of a trench and into the open. And we can see that they're hightailing it. They're now running into a house, which is unequivocally much worse than a trench. A house is, of course, above ground, and when it gets hit by a bomb, it's just going to fling wooden fragments everywhere and bits of metal and glass. I mean, like, that's definitely not as good as a trench. But just to go back here for a second, I saw something really interesting. Right here, that looks like an airburst round. I couldn't exactly tell. Maybe it was a round that just was faulty and exploded on a tree branch. I'm not really sure. We can now see a little bit of that clip where the IFV got hit. We can now see a drone get shot out of the sky. Now that APC is being abandoned again, and we can see a Russian tank with a cope cage. Incredibly rare. Very few tanks that entered the war with a cope cage still exist, but we did see one on the run right there. So pretty good. We can now see another tank once again going for the turret toss competition. It was okay, but it wasn't the best. We now see the Ukrainian tanks on the move once more. A burnt and disfigured mass of a Russian tank. Some armored personnel carriers, more destroyed Russian tanks. A destroyed Kamaz, it seems. A T-72B that was destroyed in a field, of course marked with Z's, clearly a Russian vehicle. A TOS. Now we can see some nice cinematic footage that the Ukrainians compiled at the end of the video, and I'm always a big fan of cinematic footage. We now see them getting the drone at the end of a good day, and I have to say that that was a great day for that Ukrainian unit. They knocked out a large amount of Russian vehicles, and it's always great to see because every single Russian loss is practically irreplaceable due to the Russians' lack of being able to manufacture replacements. And when I say that, a lot of these tanks, the modern versions of the tanks, like the T-72B3 or the T-80U or the BVM, they rely heavily on computer components to get that modern edge. And they're really just heavily upgraded old Russian tanks. And so everything that you need to be able to make a T-80 BVM pretty much has to be bought from outside of Russia and shipped in. And the Russians don't have that ability anymore due to the massive sanctions. So wonderful to know that every single loss we saw in that video will practically be an irreplaceable one. And so with that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see a new mechanized brigade. This is cutting edge. And as Kevin Spacey said in the Call of Duty game Advanced Warfare, what you're seeing here is advanced warfare. Check this out.
Nuts, Mr. Meth.
And I have to mute it. But this man has begun a brand new form of mechanized warfare. Just look at him go. Look at the balance. Look at the skill. He's even able to shoulder the rifle while he goes riding away on this wheel. I gotta say, huge credit to this man. He alone has created a whole new form of warfare. If they use that, and of course I'm kind of joking, I don't see how that could be usable, but if they were able to use that against the Russians are going to be flipping out. They're going to be thinking that Ukrainian soldiers are running so fast, you can't even see their legs move. But with that, we're now going to be moving on to the last bit of location, well, the second to last bit of location unknown news, where we can see a burning Russian convoy. A wonderful sight to see. I don't know what the caption's talking about, but take a look at this burning convoy. Where you see one vehicle abandoned and 3 burning. Little ammo cook-offs going off in each of them. And considering that they're all burning at the same time, we know that they all pretty much got hit at the same time as well. Wonderful to see. Always happy to see this kind of stuff, and I bet y'all are as well. A convoy being destroyed like this, while not an entire BTG, it is a sizable portion. 3 armored personnel carriers and a single main battle tank makes up 10% of a battalion tactical group's, I guess you could say, armored vehicles and also their tank force. So just seeing this convoy here being destroyed and abandoned entirely is 10% of a BTG that was just wiped out, almost in a single sitting. The Ukrainians knocked it out like it was nothing. So, of course, wonderful to see, and I hope that we continue to see 10%er convoys being wiped out, because it's always just good to know that they will be having less and less to work with. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our final bit of location unknown news tonight, where we can see an Azov soldier who was a prisoner of war for a while, having finally been released, being reunited with his wife. It was a very nice little video, and I'm going to let y'all see it here. Gotta mute it, but you can see the wife right here. She just met up with her husband. We can see that he has some kind of an arm injury, but of course they are more than ecstatic to be back with each other, and it must have been a harrowing thing for that wife to have dealt with, considering that this poor man was being tortured day in, day out, and she never knew if she would see him again or not. And I'm sure it was definitely an incredibly harrowing thing for the Azov soldier himself, considering that he had to go through that tenure in a Russian prisoner of war camp, which was a little over a month. I believe it was about a month and a week. While not an incredibly long time in the prisoner of war camp, any amount of time in a prisoner of war camp has never been something that people look forward to. So it's good to see that he's back, and it's good to see that they finally reunited. A happy ending to one of the stories that's been going on in this war. With that, we're now going to be moving out of our Location Unknown segment, and we're now going to be moving into our Kharkiv segment. Starting off the news today of the Kharkiv salient, we haven't gotten a lot of news, kind of frontline activities, but as usual, we've seen the Ukrainians levying a large amount of artillery fire onto the Russians in this area to try and at least divert the Russians' attention from the Lysychansk area and make them divert their attention to 2 different areas, Kharkiv and Kherson. So with that, let me put up this video real quick. And of course, the unit that has been conducting the artillery barrages on film today is the Kraken unit. I don't know a lot about them, but I do have to say the name is pretty cool. And so, here's the video. We see the artillery raining down, and it's causing a substantial amount of damage. Let's see, that says Borocha Artillery. I know I mispronounced that heavily. I'm not really good at pronouncing this kind of stuff, but I believe that was pointing out Russian artillery. We can now see the Ukrainian artillery landing on that position, and hopefully in a second we'll see something brewing up. I don't think we did, but maybe they hit Russian artillery. We can once again see it saying Borocha Artillery. I'm so sorry. I know I'm mispronouncing that terribly. Looks like a little Russian camp's been set up, and it looks like the Ukrainians are about to do a deconstructing speed run on it. I think that camp's about to be taken down quicker than it was put up. And I see another bomblet being dropped onto the camp. Looks like a little fire has started down there. Now we see a Russian grad. Well, apparently that's a Ukrainian grad. Sorry, correction there. We can now see that grad fire appearing to fall into the tree line, as we can see the rockets now landing. And it looks like they're giving the old 1-2 to this camp. And giving it a little bit of bomblets and also MLRS rockets. A decent combination. The drone was pretty much to try and soften them up a little bit. It looks like the MLRS might be trying to finish them off. A good video to see. And it's wonderful to know that the Ukrainians are still hammering and chipping away at the Russians bit by bit, and that camp will most likely not see the light of day again, meaning that the Ukrainians and their defensive positions in this area of the front may be bolstered by the lack of Russian soldiers trying to push anything there. And so with that, unfortunately, we don't have any more news from the Kharkiv salient, and it is great to know that the Kharkiv salient has really become, has really became an area where the Russians take a decent amount of casualties, but in turn, they don't really get any benefit out of anything. They're no longer able to push an offensive in the Kharkiv salient, as far as we know. They've been lacking that ability for about 2 months at this point. But they continuously take losses that we can confirm on film, like that one right there. So great to see, and I hope the Ukrainians can keep that up, because it's pretty much become a Russian meat grinder up here, where the Ukrainians practically take no losses, while the Russians are just throwing men into a defensive line that's making no progress and no gains, and just losing. And it's just a lose-lose situation for them. They're not gaining anything from those losses. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the line to the Izyum and Lyman area. Of course, we haven't gotten any news from the Chuhuiv or Balaklia area as of yet, but we did get some news from the Izyum area today, as we did see a Ukrainian soldier firing a javelin off the back of a truck. I'm actually going to flip us over to Twitter real quick so we don't get black screened. Everyone hates being black screened, and I especially do. We'll mute that so that way no one gets ear blasted. And here's the video. You see him firing the javelin, and it's now on the way. It goes right back down and hits dead on a tank in the distance, knocking it out. Now, I don't know if that's a stereo or what. I don't think it is, but still, nice little loadout they got here. They just drive the truck around, and this guy, I guess he just sits in the truck bed with a javelin, and they just pull up somewhere, stop. This guy aims the javelin, fires it, and they take a tank out. Pretty solid strategy, and also, this looks like an American truck. And we all know that American trucks are pretty cool and pretty decent at what they do. You know, I'm sure that's about to start a whole fight in the live chat about which company makes the best truck. But still, great to see that they are firing javelins at the Russians still, and that they still have ammo for the javelins, and that they are, in fact, effective. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Izyum area and on into the Lyman area, the Lyman/Slavyansk area, where today we saw some heavy shelling around the area of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk by the Russians and attempting to hit Ukrainian positions. And so here's the video. It's really more so audio than the video, but here it is nonetheless. The artillery is raining down on the Ukrainians, yet as far as we know, the Ukrainians have held their line, and they have not budged 1 inch from their defensive positions that they were holding as of yesterday. And so while this artillery barrage does look fierce and sound fierce, it has actually done nothing to break the willpower of the Ukrainian defenders, and hopefully that remains to be so. As of right now, we do know that there are Ukrainian defenders on the other side of the Seversky Donetsk River, apparently taking up defensive positions on the ridge that spans pretty much the entirety of the Seversky Donetsk River from north to south, and hopefully they're able to continue to hold these positions, because if they get pushed off of them, the only defensive barrier they'll have left is the Seversky Donetsk River, and if the Russians are able to cross that, the Russians and the Ukrainians will pretty much be fighting on largely flat ground. But with that, We're now about to start moving into the Lysychansk area, which has had a massive amount of news today. But before we get there, we're of course going to answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer that, I just stubbed my finger right there, we're then going to move on to the next segment, which will be the Lysychansk and Northern Donbass segment. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So up first for our first question segment, we have a $20 super chat from Edward Curl, one of our channel regulars, and he does not leave a comment. So thank you very much, Edward, once again for your support, and thank you for being a longtime viewer. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Santiago Flores, another channel regular and channel legend, who says, the big Russian paper bear is using just quantity, not quality in their attacks, as per Warsaw Pact tactics of the 1980s. In time, they will be worn out, and the only thing left is tactical nukes to hold the world hostage.
That is fairly true, and I also thank you very much for the support. That's something that the Russian tactics actually revolve around heavily, is the use of nuclear weapons. A lot of people may not know this, but Cold War doctrine in both the United States and Russia dictated that if a conventional war was to begin between the Soviet Union and the United States and Europe, the Soviets and the U.S. were practically going to start using tactical nuclear weapons on the front lines nearly immediately. In fact, that was the Russians' go-to strategy, to the point that they actually made it easier in terms of training for Russian pilots, because the Russian pilots, just to kind of give a little bit of a backstory and a history to this, Russian pilots from the 50s onwards had to hit a certain target at a certain range in their aircraft with unguided rockets or bombs. And they had to be able to pass that class, or I guess you could say that course, to be able to become a fighter pilot, and also to keep being a fighter pilot, as those tests were regularly done in training. And of course, repeated training over an amount of time. And so, as the 60s went on, the Russians developed the doctrine that they would not be using unguided bombs and unguided rockets on the battlefield with aircraft for the most part. The aircraft would pretty much be using tactical nukes from the start. And so they completely removed most of the accuracy requirements in this training course, and they made it to where you could pretty much drop the bomb anywhere within 1/8 of a mile, I believe, in any direction around the target, and that would be considered a hit. And the whole entire reason behind that that kind of like target hit area being so much larger and so less accurate is because, of course, they were just planning on giving them tactical nukes from the start and telling them to fly out there and drop those onto Western forces. And that actually came back to bite the Russians really poorly in the Afghan war, because when they went into Afghanistan, the pilots did not know how to accurately drop conventional munitions because they never had the need to do that in training. And so when they went to Afghanistan and fire support would be called in, if the Afghans were almost on top of the Soviet soldiers, if an aircraft came in and dropped a bomb, it could really fall anywhere. It could fall onto the Russians, it could fall into the Mujahideen, or it could just fall completely astray from everyone, everywhere, and just fall on a cliff or something nearby. And so it was a complete disaster for the Russian Air Force. I believe that they tried to fix some of that training later on. I think the Russian Federation has gone back to trying to at least train them how to use conventional weapons like unguided munitions and such things like that. But still, as far as we know, it's not that great of a training program. And this is before the war even happened. And it seems like Russian accuracy with unguided ordnances is still incredibly poor. And on the flip side, just to talk about America a little bit, that's actually something that the United States emphasizes heavily in almost all of their training courses and normal exercises for all kinds of aircraft, is the ability to drop munitions on a target. The United States, though, uses a lot of guided munitions, so it does make the job a lot easier. It's really more like inputting stuff on a computer, more so than actually trying to aim the bomb onto the target. But the fact still stands that the Russians are well behind in that kind of regard. And so, in that perspective, to try and address that comment a little bit better, I do believe that the Russians will be at a disadvantage by and large. Could you actually reread that one real quick, Matthew, to make sure I can carry through on it?
So yes, Santiago said, the big Russian paper bear is using just quantity and not quality in their attacks, as per Warsaw Pact tactics of the 1980s. In time, They will be worn out, and the only thing left is tactical nukes to hold the world hostage.
Okay, thank you. So that brings me back to what that was actually supposed to address, was just the quality over quantity assessment. And in that instance right there, which is just one of the few examples, we could go through a million, but I'm going to save us some time. Just based off that one instance right there, you can get the idea that it is, of course, a quantity over quality approach. And so the Russians, by and large, even for their contract soldiers and people who are supposed to be in the military for a pretty good tenure, are even less experienced than Western-trained counterparts like the Ukrainians, which are operating off of the Western doctrines, like the United States and Britain use. And so over time, the Russians will be churned down into pretty much nothing, and also their equipment reflects that quality over quantity concept. As you can see, a T-72 or a T-80 doesn't even stand a chance from an ATGM, whether it hits it from the front, the sides, or the rear. So with that, I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And real quick, folks, I will mention that if you want to put in a question for us to answer on the stream, please once again, please tag either me or the enforcer in your message, and I will put it in the spreadsheet. I'm sure many of you have noticed that we're having lower chat volume than usual tonight. And we kind of expected this. It is the 4th of July weekend after all, and we figured a lot of people would probably be going out of town. And also I see that a lot of our channel regulars got off early tonight as well. So that was to be expected, but guess what? That's better for you that don't want to put in a donation. That means we can answer more of your questions tonight. So
and also,
please go ahead and put in your question.
And also another thing before we move on is that I have had one of my Discord mods, and actually one of my friends, Brad, reach out to me, and he said a lot of people have been asking, are y'all going to be streaming on the 4th of July? And the answer to that is absolutely not. It is a Monday, and on top of that, it is the holiday of the year for the United States. It's the 4th of July, which Christmas and the 4th of July kind of are the two most important holidays in the United States, and then the third one's Thanksgiving. So in that regard, absolutely not. I'm going to be taking that day off. I'm actually going to be going and reenacting on the 4th of July, which will be incredibly fun for me. And I hope you all have a fun time as well on the 4th of July. Make sure to go out, have a fun time with your family, have a barbecue, watch a fireworks show. There's going to be loads of them going on. A lot of them went on tonight. We actually had one in our neighborhood happen just not too long ago. And what was bizarre is that I hadn't watched a fireworks show in a long time, and standing outside and listening to the fireworks, and also some of them were just white flashes on the ground. I was like, dang. I was like, wow, this is really close to an artillery barrage in Severodonetsk or Lysychansk, kind of like I showed you all that video just a little bit ago, which Matthew and me were both talking about. We're like, man, you know, you don't ever think about it, but firework shows, and at least in their sound and the flashes, kind of do resemble a nighttime artillery barrage a little bit. And I think, you know, and I think that has to be true because a lot of veterans do get PTSD attacks during large fireworks shows sometimes. And that's one thing I know that one of my friends, Bill, which I've talked about before, he actually did get PTSD attacks from fireworks that went off in the neighborhood that we both lived in at the time. And that was something we always wanted to keep into consideration, is that he was our next door neighbor. And so we never wanted to fire all fireworks to send him into a PTSD attack. But with that, we're going to be moving on to the next question. And I just want to address that real quick so that way no one was under the pretense that we would be streaming a special stream on Monday on the 4th of July. And so with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have a $50 super chat from Master Chief 117, who says, in Halo Infinite, a Razorback pickup with 5 Marines and heavy weapons is more powerful than a Scorpion tank, which sounds ridiculous, but in the Ukraine war, I see soldiers holding javelins in a pickup. Do you think the tank is a relic of the past?
Well, thank you so much for the support, Master Chief. And to answer that question, you are a very big fan of Halo, apparently, because your name is Master Chief. And also, you aren't talking about Halo Infinite, which my friend does play a little bit. But to answer that question in a realistic concept, like you're asking about, which is actually a great question, it's kind of debated right now where the tank is still going to have a place on the battlefield in the future. My answer to that is yes, because artillery, like front-firing artillery, has kind of evolved in a way to where it still exists today. And surprisingly, lo and behold, and when I say direct front-firing artillery, imagine a Napoleon cannon, just for concept. You know, it's a cannon that isn't lobbing shells upwards and downwards. It is a cannon that's literally firing directly forward. And a lot of y'all are like, where in the world does that exist to this day? And I'm going to tell y'all, it's the craziest thing, but I believe the tank is literally the tank. Well, tank singer is not going to pull up the tank. It's going, anyways. the tank in general is pretty much an evolution of that kind of cannon, in my opinion. A tank is not really supposed to fight other tanks or go out on its own. It's supposed to be used to support the infantry, a lot like a Napoleon cannon would have been used in the Civil War to support infantry. It is a front-firing cannon that has to face directly at its target to be able to hit it, unlike a howitzer which lobs them upwards and then downwards. And so this, in its own right, is an evolution of the cannon, the conventional cannon you would have thought about from 100 or 200 years ago. And so in that right, concepts never really leave the battlefield once they're there. You know, they may change drastically. That's one thing that's certain. But they're always going to remain. And so while I think that the tank is sort of becoming obsolete as we see, there will be a place for the tank on the battlefield in the future. It may change heavily. The tanks of the future may not be recognizable in their concept or their design to the tanks of today, but by and large, there's always a way that these things will continue to survive in some way, shape, or form. Just like the cannon right here, which you would have thought would have largely become obsolete in terms of infantry support, pretty much evolved into the tank in a way, and then the cavalry kind of evolved into the tank as well. The tank kind of took out two birds with one stone. So with that, well, you know, we're not going to go into that, but anyways, I hope that answers the question, and I do believe that the tank in its current form is a little obsolete, and it's most likely going to be going through a lot of doctrine changes and also design changes to make it fit the niche that it will now have to live with, pretty much. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we're going to move on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to move on to the Lysychansk as well as Luhansk news.
All right. And for the record, we have been paid the first visit by the Cambot. It has been on hiatus for quite some time, but it is back, and it is back in force, but it is gone now. So, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Brian Cave, who says, I hope you liked your last pizza. A bit more help, your night's hungry signals. How much ammo is typical for a single frontline soldier to have on his or her person before having to step back to seek ammo? Slava Ukraine.
Excellent question. Also, I will tell you that we have enjoyed the pizzas. We actually got some tonight by coincidence. We got a supreme pizza, a pepperoni pizza, and then like an Italian pizza that has like the peppers on it. They were all good. It was one of the few times that we had gotten an exceptionally good pizza. They're always good, but exceptionally good is hard to come by. And so I was just mauling a pizza tonight. But so I thank you so much for the support. And to answer that question, the amount of ammunition that a single infantryman can carry does vary from period to period and unit to unit depending on what kind of weapons they're using. But by and large, if you were to go off of a NATO soldier that uses like an M4, or a US soldier specifically that carries an M4, just as a ballpark estimate, we will Google it here, but I'm going to take a ballpark that's probably somewhere around 220 rounds. But we're going to pull that up and see how much ammo does an infantry carry? I guess that'll give us the answer. Most infantry soldiers carry 210 rounds. I was pretty much right on the dot of 556, which is 223 NATO rounds spread between 7 magazines. So somehow I knew that number nearly off the top of my head. And so I hope that answers the question. I mean, like, that number can vary. If there was an extra magazine added, there it would be up to around 240. And if, you know, there's a magazine deducted, it would be around 180. But still, the number does hover around the low 200s. And I hope I answered that question pretty well. And I hope I surprised everyone by somehow knowing that number nearly off the top of my head. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And of course, that number can vary with the Russians as well, and also the Ukrainians, because they are not using 556, they're using 545 or 762. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we have reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat for the night, do not fret. We will answer all of them. And I have noticed that a lot of people are apparently enjoying the fireworks shows tonight, that a lot of people are talking about right now. I've seen a lot of people in the live chat saying that there's fireworks show going on right behind them. And I hope that a lot of y'all are enjoying them, and everyone has a fun 4th of July. Of course, we're going to be here reporting the news today and tomorrow. We'll also be doing the Sunday fundraiser tomorrow. But on Monday, we will not be here. We take Mondays off, and I'm going to take that 4th of July off and go enjoy that reenacting event. So with that, we're now going to move on to the Lysychansk area, as well as the northern, the Luhansk region, and after that, we'll then move on to our next question segment, and we've got a lot of news to cover here in this one. Starting off with the most important news from the Severodonetsk area, we have seen that Russian forces have reached the center of Lysychansk, and the Ukrainians control around half of the city now, being pushed off of a large amount of the ridgeline that overlooked Severodonetsk. Here's the video proving that Kadyrovite Chechens are now in the center of the city in the city square.
Ассаламу алейкум, Рамзан Ахматович. Съемочная группа ЧКТРК Грозный на передовой. Это самый, что ни на есть, центр Лисичанска. Город полностью освобожден. Сейчас идет активная зачистка. Уже предполагаем, что начнутся всякие спекуляции насчет того, что освобожден город или не освобожден. Но вот мы в центре, в проспекте Ленина. Самый, что ни на есть, центр. Больше центра здесь нет. Город под нашим контролем. Ахмад Сила, Аллаху Акбар.
And just to confirm, a lot of people may say that this isn't in the center of Lysychansk. I made sure to get on Google Maps today and look at where that square was and find it in Lysychansk to be able to confirm that the Russians are in the center of the city. And so I'm actually going to go into satellite footage and show y'all exactly where this place is on the map. So we go down here. It's actually this square. And just to make sure that I disprove all doubts that the Russians are not in the middle of the city, here's a street view that was made some years ago, sideways though, but you can see the Lysychansk sign that they were standing in front of here in the video. So they have in fact made it to the center of the city, which is somewhat concerning, but at the same time, it's not that bad. We've already expected that the Ukrainians will most likely retreat or lose Lysychansk here on this channel, and it does look like that will be coming to fruition. Of course, in the process, they will be losing the heights and the cliffs that surround the Severodonetsk River along its course near the Lysychansk city, but at the same time, all is not lost. The Ukrainians are making the Russians pay in blood for every single city block they are taking in that city, and there's also some pretty nice spots that they could take up defensive positions further behind the city. Once again, just because they're losing the city, it's not a major loss. Lysychansk is not some kind of major industrial center of the country. It's really just a symbolic city at that. Really, Severodonetsk and Lysychansk are almost practically the same cities. And so if you would like to, you can pretty much consider this whole entire battle that occurred in both Severodonetsk and Lysychansk the same one. Although they are two technically different cities, but if you look at them on Google Maps, they pretty much merge into one large city with a river going in between. So with that, it's still unfortunate to see that the Russians have made it this far, but we do know that the Ukrainians are fighting as hard as possible, and it is a defensive war, which means they are allowed to lose ground, and as long as they're inflicting massive losses on enemy forces, it's still technically considered a victory. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news near Bila Ora, where we saw some Russian tanks in action near the Lysychansk city area. In this video, we saw a T-80BV as well as a BTR-82. You can see the T-80BV moving down the road. T-80BVs are rather old. Some of the last times that these were used were during the Chechen War in the 90s. You can now see it firing. See the tank backing up a little bit and still firing. What's interesting to me, and of course I can kind of explain this away, is that the Russians are turning the turret to the right and completely exposing the side of their tank and firing off into the distance instead of turning the whole tank to the right and then using the elevation, well, the depression on the air side of the road to kind of hide the hull of the tank. That seems like it would be the smarter principle, considering that an ATGM could easily blast through the side of this tank. But at the same time, if they were to turn it the other direction, we've already seen enough evidence to know that an ATGM would also bust straight through the frontal armor of the tank, which is the strongest. So I don't really think it matters which direction this tank faces, and I believe the Russian crew does know this, and that's why they're not making any consideration for this, because they know that this tank is practically an armored coffin. You now see them turning the whole entire tank around and showing the backside to the supposed enemy forces in the distance, and then driving off. And I say this sarcastically, some excellent tankmanship being shown here on film. These people are just terrible. We now see the BTR-82 racing up the exact same road to that heavy firefight that's occurring in the distance. They are really giving it to those Ukrainians. You can just tell there are loads of them here because there's absolutely no sound in the video. We all know that Ukrainians are deathly silent. And also, surprisingly, out of the two vehicles that could have faced directly at where they were supposedly firing, the BTR-82, which is the thinnest armored of the two, and it doesn't matter which direction it faces because the armor is practically the same on all sides, it faces the front of the BTR towards the enemy. So, and I'm calling the Ukrainians the enemy, of course, because we're looking at this through the Russian video. But the tank doesn't do that. That doesn't make any sense. Anyways, we're going to let the video continue. I honestly think this is almost like a display because there's no way they're trying to stage this on Russian TV as a firefight of sorts. They're not even firing at Ukrainians that we can see firing back. They haven't even shown us the Ukrainians. They haven't even shown us the countryside where they're firing at to know what they're actually shooting at. So, of course, another staged Russian video, but they did say that this supposedly came out of the area around Lysychansk, and so I just had to include it just because it supposedly was from here, but I have my doubts about whether this is real or not because they're not showing enough evidence that these Russian vehicles were firing at any Ukrainian forces. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next video, which is from the south of Lysychansk, where we can see a Russian tank get obliterated. Everyone loves to see the Russian tanks get obliterated, and I always keep that in mind and in consideration when I pick out the clips of news we're going to watch today. I always try and get a video of a Russian tank getting popped, and we can see one here getting popped. A little bit of a turret flinging competition again. I think that's the third one of the day. That one was about the highest one as well, and so today we have a champion. It's this one. It looks like it went up about 200 feet or so. Pretty good. I'm sure that the crew, if they were still around, got to feel the thrill of their lives as they rode the most dangerous drop elevator in the world, but that tank is certainly not going to be used again. I can tell you that. And, you know, there's some people out there who may be like, oh, you're a liar, you know, that tank could be used again, but I'm pretty sure this one cannot be used. Just trust me on this one. So with that, we're going to be moving on to the next bit of news from the Lysychansk area, where we've also seen in the area of Vovcherivka, the 17th Tank Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces in action and hitting a Russian ZSU-23, which is also called a Shilka. Here's the video. When you see some Russian soldiers wandering around in destroyed homes that they have pretty much leveled on their own, having to live in the squalor of their own actions. And every time we see the slow camera zoom in by a Ukrainian drone, we know that imminent doom is coming to the Russians. They do the same camera trick each time. And so whenever I see this, I'm like, oh, it's coming. And it did. It landed right on top of that truck we just saw earlier in the video, taking out countless Russians and also knocking out the truck and the supplies that were in the back of it as well. The truck is now burning quite nicely. Soon we'll have a nice fire. And when I say a nice fire, I mean one to cook on. Right now it's a little bit too hot. It's a little bit too fiery and too sporadic. You now see them focusing on another spot on the front. Well, actually, it's the same spot. They're zooming into it again. And whenever we see that zoom, you can largely assume, and I don't know if it's going to be true this time, but usually there's an artillery round coming in right after that zoom. The fire's now spread to the house, and so if there are any Russians taking refuge in that house, they're now running out and trying to find cover elsewhere because now the house is on fire. Some secondary target got hit off screen. We didn't see it, but we can see a small fire burning over there too. And that's the end of the video. Good to see that the Ukrainian artillery is still beating up the Russians. And we're now going to move on to some news behind the front, specifically pertaining to two weapon systems before we move on to this next bit of news. which is actually attached to one of the clips over here. Before we get to the clips that kind of come together to create a whole story, I am going to show you all some more evidence that the HIMARS are still on the front lines in Ukraine and still being used. Here we can see a picture from inside of one of the cabs of the HIMARS and also an AK sitting in the middle of the cab. Pretty nice. Well, that in the next footage, well, in the next picture, sorry, we can then see the rocket pod that the 6 rockets are held into, and also, I guess you could say, the elevation mechanism that that pod is attached to. Then after that, we finally see a front view of the HIMARS, and what a machine. We know what this thing is capable of. We haven't seen one of them get destroyed yet, and it seems like the Ukrainians are putting them to great use, and I hope we continue to see that, because so far they've been using these things to great effect. Moving on to our next bit of news, speaking of artillery in the Lysychansk area, we've seen the Panzerhaubitze in action today, firing its 155mm gun. Check out this video, and then we're about to see something that's pretty wild. Here's the video. Panzerhaubitze fires. And then it starts backing up into the tree line, most likely to start leaving. Now, what's very crazy about this whole thing is that the Panzerhaubitze, as far as we know, is in the Lysychansk area and being operated. And the Panzerhaubitze, like every other Western artillery piece, uses the 155mm shell. And this is the only video we got today of a Western artillery system firing anywhere around Lysychansk. The only airburst ammunition that we knew that the Ukrainians could possibly have would have been delivered by the West, say France or the United States, and it would have been an airburst munition. Today, for the first time ever, we saw airburst ammunition in use on a Russian tank. It exploded several hundred feet above the tank and actually managed to destroy it. So here's the video, and as far as I know, this may be directly attached to that clip we just saw of the Panzerhaubitze firing. And so check it out as this airburst round literally rips through a Russian tank. Alright, there it was, right there. You saw it. That was the explosion, mid-air, several hundred feet above the tank. And you can already see the tank got hit by the shrapnel. The shrapnel punctured the tank and has now caught it on fire, destroying the tank. Wicked! Now, this is the first time we've ever seen anything like this, so we're going to rewind it and actually look at that again. Right there, you could see the explosion. Right there, and then the shrapnel went flying straight down to the tank and destroyed it. It is the first time ever that we've seen airburst rounds being used in Ukraine, and I think the Ukrainians just got a taste for these things, because this thing just knocked out a Russian tank without any effort whatsoever, and it seems like the airburst rounds may be even easier to use than, say, a ground impact round. It may be more effective. And so we'll have to continue to see if the Ukrainians start using this more and more. But wow, what a wonderful combination. A Panzerhaubitze 2000 using brand new airburst rounds. On top of that, we know that the Germans are providing VR assistance with the Panzerhaubitze, which, if some of y'all weren't around last night, the German government actually confirmed and claimed that Ukrainian crews were sent over with the Panzerhaubitze back to Ukraine with VR headsets inside the tanks. And so if they ever run into a problem in the middle of operating it, they throw on the VR headset, they turn it on, and they're immediately patched into a Panzerhaubitze representative, pretty much, at tech support, which will guide them through the problems they're having and troubleshoot with them. So if this was for the Panzerhaubitze, someone may have been on the line with tech support with a VR headset on, trying to figure out how to use something in it, considering that it's still a brand new system that the Ukrainians are still trying to get used to. But a wonderful video, and it's great to finally see the evidence that the Ukrainians are using airburst rounds. With that, we're now going to move down to the city of Popasna, and I'm not sure if Popasna is on the map anymore, because the Ukrainians hit a Russian ammunition depot today that exploded like a nuclear bomb. I'm not exaggerating this. This was actually on our short video today, and a lot of people in the comments section, I was busting out laughing at this, said, you know, there's a lot of videos on YouTube that talk about big explosions, and this is the first one that didn't lie. And I gotta say, this is the biggest explosion we've ever seen an ammunition depot go through in this war yet. And so here's the video. I would honestly say that this is very similar to the Beirut explosion that occurred a few years ago in size. And so, without further ado, here is the largest explosion to rock Ukraine yet. And it's about to happen right now. Golly, you could see the shockwave on that thing for a second. Look at that. Whew. I would have hated to have been around that or even near it. This cameraman probably went deaf for a little bit from the sound of it all. This explosion is giving the Moab a run for its money. Whew. Man. I just couldn't imagine being anywhere near an explosion that big. And the Ukrainians did it with one artillery shell, as far as we knew. They hit the ammunition dump. Of course, with probably several shells, but one of them got that lucky hit. The ammunition depot caught on fire and started to burn, and then the ammunition went up like the Halifax explosion or the Beirut explosion. If y'all didn't know, a quick little history aside, just to talk about large explosions throughout history, and this may be one of them. The Halifax explosion actually occurred during World War I in the city of Halifax, Canada. Let me make sure I spell this correctly. And the explosion actually leveled practically the entire city of Halifax and beached some of the largest cargo ships in the world on the shores near Halifax because the explosion was just that large. I believe it was the ship Mont Blanc that exploded. But golly, if you look at the pictures of the aftermath, here is the city of Halifax before, and let me see if I can find a picture of the city afterwards. And this is the city after the explosion. And you can see that it looks like the Hiroshima bomb just went off on this thing. It literally leveled the town. And that just gives you the idea of the raw power of some of these ammunition explosions that happened. The Mont Blanc explosion in Halifax Harbor was entirely ammunition exploding within the ship. And this explosion here you see in this video was entirely from Russian ammunition stored in a depot. And so you can just get the idea, based off of the size of this explosion, the raw destructive power this probably had on the surrounding areas. It probably flattened a decent area. So with that, it's great to see that the Ukrainians are inflicting indirect damage on the Russians through blowing up the Russians' own ammunition and probably leveling a large amount of their equipment and forces in the process if they were nearby. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next video from the Popasna area, where we can then see a Luhansk People's Republic tank hitting an AT mine, but we don't see it in a video. We actually see it in like a slideshow of pictures. According to the LP, the Luhansk People's Republic, they say that the entire crew reportedly survived, which is something that we have seen before, so that isn't a far-fetched statement. But at the same time, when you see the actual pictures of this mine exploding on the front of the tank, it always begs the question, did they survive? And I'm not really sure. We didn't get enough evidence about it. All we have to work off of are these few pictures. And you can see that all of the flaps on the side of the tank, along with the ERA blocks, have been flung up in the air. It's certainly been detract, and some of the shrapnel may have actually gotten inside of the tank. Regardless, this tank was destroyed to the point the crew most likely bailed from it. And that's pretty much the end of that story. It's great to know that the LPR is running into roadblocks near Popasna and hitting anti-tank mines, and hopefully they are able to continue to run into those kinds of bad situations and bad problems, because that only gives the Ukrainians less and less to have to work against. And so with that, we've now covered all of the Lysychansk and Luhansk news, which has been a tongue twister for me tonight. And we're now going to start moving on into the Donetsk news, as well as the Southern Front and the remainder of the news from around the country and the speech from Zelensky. But before we get there, we're of course going to answer another 3 questions from the chat, and then we'll move on to the rest of the news for the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so it is now time for question segment round 2. And first up, we have a $20 super chat from Squamous Amos, who says, I had to change my name because the second time I donated, I was inundated with phishing scams. Do y'all know if anyone else experienced this? Love the channel and wish I was in a position to give more. Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you very much for his support. And of course, it's any support we're greatly appreciative of. It, of course, is the only thing that helps our channel to keep running. And so we're just appreciative that everyone enjoys it so much that they want to see us keep on doing this. So I'm totally fine if it's a little bit or a lot. As long as everyone's just wanting us to keep going, I'm more than grateful for it. And so thank you for that. I don't know if anyone's been suffering phishing scams. I haven't really run into a lot of those myself, being the person who runs this channel. And of course, my email is publicly listed on this channel. I haven't had a lot of phishing scams in that regard, but I have heard and seen of people making fake accounts that have the enforcer name on it and also the profile picture and trying to fish people for WhatsApp donations or Patreons. Well, not Patreons. It's like WhatsApp and Cash App and I believe PayPal as well. And that's one thing that I've always made sure to avoid here on this channel, is that I'm never really going to ask anyone. I'm never going to make it public, a WhatsApp, a Cash App, or a PayPal or anything, because then they could give scammers a little bit of leverage to seem more original. Well, not really original, more authentic in a way. And so I want to make sure that people can avoid being scammed, and so that's why I always make sure that support goes through YouTube live chat, so that way you know it's being donated on stream, and we also recognize it on stream pretty much every single time, unless if it's after the show ends and we're running the outro card. So that way it's kind of like a receipt in a way, and so you know that we did receive it. But also, I just haven't really heard about that. So if anyone would like to actually share their experiences in the live chat and let him know if anyone else has kind of experienced that, I would love to know if people are. And unfortunately, I don't know of a way to stop that, but hopefully there can be a way that is found. But I thank you so much for the support and also enjoying our channel a whole load. And I hope that the phishing scams don't give you too much trouble. And so with that, we're on to the next question. And thank you so much for the support once again.
All right, and moving on to the next one, we have a $20 donation from Michael Francis, who says in a super sticker, "Woot."
And whoop, and a thank you so much for the support. It always helps out our channel a lot, and the super stickers are really cool. We like looking at them, and we actually had BC Skymanson in like a Doge Samurai, which was really cool, and we actually had a fun time looking at that one. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Steven Safruk, who says, "Enjoy the 4th of July. Thanks for the good coverage and upbeat attitude. Enforcer 2024.
Well, thank you so much for the support. Sadly, I wouldn't be old enough to run for any position in 2024, but do support me for my presidential bid in 2040. I'm not going to get political here, but I will try and make everyone in this country proud and try and make America a much better place for everyone involved. But with that, moving on from that, I do thank you so much for enjoying my upbeat attitude. I always try and make sure to bring a positive and upbeat nature to the streams, because I just tell you, I have tried to watch other people's streams sometimes, and I cannot stand when people either A, try and put on a fake facade about who they are and try and act totally different, or if they're dead on the inside and they reflect it on the stream. Because if you've ever listened to anyone that just drones on and on and on without changing their voice fluctuation or anything, that will get to you terribly. And so that's also why I fluctuate my voice really high and then also really low sometimes, because I always want to make sure that it's really engaging to hear, so that way people just don't get bored listening to the droning of news on and on and on. And so I thank you so much for enjoying that. I put a lot of effort into trying to do this, and surprisingly enough, a lot of my family actually thinks I'm monotone, because off stream, well, this actually was before the stream. Off stream, I of course just talk normally. Naturally, people just pick like a set tone to go with when they're talking, and they just stay monotone. And so I actually made sure to make a conscious effort every time I'm on stream to make sure I keep a fluctuating tone to make it more interesting to listen to. Also, yes, I just saw a bipedal species say emphasizing, and yes, it is emphasizing. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support and enjoying the efforts we go through here on stream. And I'm proud that we have another loyal member of the Lee Spring Army. So thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to our final question of this segment. And then we're going to move on to the Southern Front news, the news from around the world, which we have two of, and then the speech from Zelensky.
All right, and the final question of this segment goes to Kaltenberg, who puts in a $20 super chat and says, "Thanks, Enforcers. I have greatly enjoyed your presentations. I'm getting married on Sunday, so I may have to be gone for a few days. Slava Ukraine."
Hey!
And Kaltenberg, I know I already told you down in the live chat. First off, congrats on getting married, and of course, Slava Ukraine.
Kaltenberg, congratulations on being married. That's incredible, and especially on July 3rd. Wait a minute. No. You should get married on July 4th, because then, you know, if there's a fireworks show on the 4th of July, you can just do that for your anniversary. Now you're probably like, man, I gotta go cancel my wedding and have it move back one more day. And of course, all the wedding planning stuff can't be changed now, so you're in for a penny, in for a pound. But congratulate you so much. It's going to be so fun. and I hope that you enjoy it a lot, and I hope that you have a great time with your wife, and that you'll have a wonderful family in the future. And so congratulations. I hope you'll have a fun time. And also, thank you so much for the support tonight. And if you're gone for a few days, I completely understand in that regard. It's going to be a great time for you. And so thank you once again for the support. And I hope everyone in the live chat gives Kaltenberg a whole bunch of congratulations. That's a wonderful thing, and I hope he has a lot of fun with it. And so with that, we're going to round out this question segment on a high note with Kaltenberg. Congratulations once again. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the Donetsk news, the Southern Front news, specifically like the Kherson area, Odesa, Snake Island, the international news, and the speech from Zelensky. And so without further ado, let's get to it. Starting off in the Svitlodarsk area, we have seen a Russian helicopter score a hit on a car, but we did see survivors, which was a very fortunate thing. Apparently, this Russian helicopter got the chance to be able to use ATGMs that were wire-guided or laser-guided. I'm not really sure which the Russians used the most. I know that some American weapons use wires. I know that the Hellfire doesn't, but some of them do. But we can see here the Russian missile on its way. We can see the Ukrainian truck moving through the field, and it gets hit. It begins to tumble and roll, and the truck is ablaze, but we will see the fortunate survivor crawl out and run away to live another day. So while an incredibly unfortunate story, because people surely did die in this crash, we did see a survivor. He is on fire. Hopefully he can beat that out or roll on the ground, but he is alive. Most likely heavily wounded. And so that's the end of the video. Of course, an unfortunate video of a Ukrainian loss, but it is war, and everyone does take losses at some point. I just hate to see that every once in a while it is the Ukrainians that are taking losses. And so with that, that's the end of the video. We don't have any news beyond that of the Svitlodarsk area and what the 30th Brigade is facing at that moment, rather than that one loss of the truck by a Ka-52's missile. So with that, we're going to be moving out of the area, and of course, I want everyone to remember that those are Ukrainian soldiers and normal people, just like you and me, that did lose their lives in defense of their country, but it looks like one of them may have been able to survive, although heavily wounded, although the fire did look like it was incredibly large, and it could have been an equal chance that when he fell to the ground, he just continued to sit there and burn to death, which would be a very unfortunate and very morbid thing to think. But hopefully, you know, just trying to stay on the positive side, he was able to survive somehow, and hopefully we hear a story of him in the hospital recovering sometime in the future. But with that, we're going to be moving on to our next bit of news near the Orlivka area, where we've seen Russian Su-25s in action in the Donbass area. Of course, the Russians went through a whole editing show here, but I can confirm that the information has to be largely true, because we do see that the pylons do have unguided rockets on them, which does show that this is loaded up for a combat mission. We now see the Su-25s taking off. And I gotta say, what a small load. The Su-25 is known as the A-10 of the Russian forces, but they're only carrying 2 rocket pods, and it looks like each pod carries 4 missiles. And so in total, this thing's going to fire off 8 rockets before it runs out of ordnance, which is just insane. We can see them, of course, flying low to the ground and in a very tight formation. We now see the plane lifting up, firing off the small amount of rockets it had, and now we can see the flares popping off in the background as it takes the hard turn and tries to fly away. Of course, just really a replay of the same footage over and over from different camera angles. We can tell that this entire mission was practically constructed as a propaganda run due to how many different camera angles they had of this single moment. Now we've got another one. Also, some of y'all may think that this is an iPhone or an iPhone stand. And just for those of y'all who may not know, and of course, that's actually a pretty reasonable assumption there. It does look a lot like an iPhone, but that's actually a mirror. Planes actually do have rear view mirrors in a kind of way. They have mirrors mounted on usually I guess you could say canopy, so that way they can see behind the plane, because that's very important, especially if an enemy plane is somewhere in the area and might be in a dogfight with you. It's very important to know what's right behind you. So that's actually a mirror and not an iPhone, just in case anyone was wondering. You can see them here, actually. These are, of course, mirrors. Also, one other thing is that some of y'all may be thinking, well, if there's mirrors on the side, why isn't there a mirror on the top? Excellent question. You don't see a mirror on the top of the canopy. That's because this thing right up here where my mouse cursor is circling is actually the rear view mirror that looks directly over the top of the plane. And that's called a periscope. You heard it right. It's a periscope. It's probably the weirdest thing about a lot of Russian aircraft is that their canopies are made in such a way that visibility behind them and directly over the top of them is almost impossible, especially with a normal mirror that you could mount onto the canopy. And so the Russians had to come up with some way for them to see behind them, and they came up with a periscope. You can actually see these on MiG-21s, MiG-23s, but we're going to type in an Su-25 periscope, and I'm going to show y'all what these look like in a better picture. Because it's just it's a very interesting bit of trivia, and I'm sure a lot of friends would be impressed if you're at a cocktail party and you start talking about the rear view periscope on an Su-25. So let me see if I can find this real quick. Maybe if I type in cockpit, we'll get a better result. Su-25 cockpit. Let's see, come on, I want to find one that kind of looks up. We don't want to see the panel, we want to see the canopy. There we go. You can see it right there. There is the periscope. So you look up into it and it looks directly over the top of the plane and behind it. But it's not really the best of the best. You know, the best thing to do would be to actually design the canopy where you can just have a normal mirror attached to it. And you can see a normal mirror in something like an Su-27. Not an Su-227, but an Su-27 cockpit. And I'll show you all that. Come on, come on. I think DCS World will actually be our best bet. You can see the rear view mirrors kind of right here, but they're folded outwards instead of inwards. But with that, I hope you all have enjoyed that interesting little tidbit on how Russians look behind their planes. They don't look behind them with mirrors, they also look behind them with periscopes, which is just bizarre and kind of backwards. But anyways, with that, there were some Su-25s operating over the Donetsk area, but largely ineffective. They only fired off 8 rockets each, a total of 16. And a single MLRS truck, like a Grad, can fire off more rockets than that. So a huge waste of fuel for them for those aircraft, a huge waste of pilot man hours, but it's wonderful to know that they're wasting that kind of equipment and time just for a propaganda shoot. Moving on to the next bit of news, we've actually seen the Russians film a Ukrainian helicopter that got incredibly close and lived. Ukrainian helicopter pilots are some of the most daring on Earth. Just in case if you do not remember, they were the daring men and women who launched a raid on the Belgorod oil refineries and actually flew into Russia some 30 miles, attacked the refineries, and then turned around and flew back out and survived. And we can see one of these brave pilots flying incredibly close to Russian observers on the ground here in this video.
Блядь, он возвращает. Какой наш? Это К2, ебать, что-то.
There's the helicopter. And it's taking a nice little turn.
Наш разве, ебать? Ебать.
And I'd also like to note that apparently some of the Russian soldiers are not too fazed by this helicopter flying over, because you can see one of them right here is sitting down and taking a nap. So, I hope y'all see what I did there. But, yeah, that's the end of that video, and it's great to see that Ukrainian helicopters are being used all over the front lines, including the rare occasion of a Ukrainian Mi-24 in flight. And so with that, we're going to be moving on out of the Donetsk area as we have no more news to report. Once again, the front line here has stabilized, and it appears that neither side has been engaging in a large amount of battles or any kind of artillery action anymore, as the artillery battles have even died off. With that, We're now going to move out of the Donetsk area and all the way across the southern front, which we haven't seen anything on, of course. It's largely a very static and quiet part of the front lines right now. That may change in the future, but for now we have no suggestion that it will for at least the next 2 weeks, most likely. With that, we're now going to move even further down the line into the Kherson area, where we can see, and also I see the live chat's finally reacting to that joke. It's got a delay in between y'all and me, and so I see a lot of people taking a good laugh at that. But with that, we're now going to move on into the Kherson area, where we do know that the Ukrainians are still pushing a counterattack. It does seem that they have been stalled. We haven't heard of the massive grounds of progress that they used to be making, and so I think that this counterattack has run into some very tough ground lately, but hopefully they can overcome it and once again begin to push the Russians out of the western banks of the Dnipro River. Starting off, we have seen a drone bombing in the Kherson Finger that was conducted by the Ukrainians earlier today, and so here's the video. The Russians appear to be gathered around their worst enemy, the tractor. We can now see the Ukrainian drone introducing itself and making sure that the Russians also know that it is one of its worst enemies as well. The truck is now backing up, and the bomblet slams right into the cab, killing the... Well, it looks like it didn't actually kill the driver. It may have killed the co-pilot of the truck sitting in the passenger seat, and now all the Russians are running for the hills. And the artillery and the bomblets are raining down all over the place, destroying loads of Russian equipment, tanks, and trucks. These kinds of losses, while small in the video, collectively will help the Ukrainians to eventually push the Russians back, and hopefully, with the Russians taking those kinds of losses, the idea of retreat will enter their minds. Moving on down into the Kherson area itself, we've seen today that the 28th Brigade has also been hitting Russian vehicles in its area of the front lines right outside of the city. And so, here's the video of that. Got some music there. I wish I could play music, but sadly, we get copyrighted to oblivion whenever we play music. Sometimes we get copyrighted for playing the videos as well. So, you know, I'm taking a risk even playing the videos, but who cares? It's the war. I'm covering the news, and so I'm going to take those copyright hits if I have to. We can now see the vehicle burning and blowing up in the tree line. It looks like it got hit by artillery before the video started, and we're now seeing the after result, and it's an early 4th of July fireworks show in Ukraine. Now a fine little explosion is occurring over there, and I think that just gave the fireworks show that happened near me a run for its money. With that, we don't really have a lot of additional news to report from the Kherson area. It appears that the Ukrainians are using a large amount of artillery to try and break up or at least soften up the Russian units for the Ukrainians to be able to push out. But at the same time, we don't have any news of any frontline developments in this area, and so we will be waiting for more news like that, but as of the moment, no news has come out much like that. We're now going to move further down the coast, and we're now going to move to Odesa, where we've heard the story of a poor Odesan man who survived some of those missile attacks that occurred on Odesa just days ago, and I'm just going to let y'all listen to his story. There is text-to-speech at the bottom of the screen, and I'm not going to interrupt in respect for this poor man and the unfortunate stories he has to tell.
Простите меня. Бачу вот здесь мертвых людей, жалко детей. Знакомые погибли, дочка осталась, сирота. Вы простите меня, пожалуйста, я очень переживаю. Хорошо, что мои дети, внуки уехали, в неделю уехали в Молдавию. Сейчас сын с дочкой приезжают здесь. Простите меня еще раз. Очень страшно. Я не думал, что Путин такая сволочь, что он нападет на мирных людей. Все, он пошел против своего народа, против христиан, он пошел. Что он творит? Мы причем здесь мирные люди, себе жили, не думали ни о чем, работают все. А здесь он решил власть больше иметь. Она ему вся боком выйдет, эта власть. Все мало и мало им, когда они живутся, когда они награбятся, все. Из-за них страдают мирные люди, и дети страдают. За их коррупции и власти, за их власти, что им мало.
It's unfortunate to hear, and I hate to hear that this poor guy has, of course, gone through a lot of hardships in Odessa, much like many Ukrainians have been. And so I always hate to hear this stuff, and it's always terrible to hear about the people who've died. But when you listen to the pain and the agony that a lot of survivors are going through in their voice, it just it just makes you sympathize with them a whole load, because you can't even, I can't even get in their shoes of what they're experiencing. No one in the West, hardly ever, except if you're almost dead now and you would have been in World War II, has experienced the kind of hardships and suffering that these people in Ukraine are now facing. And so, in that regard, I really feel for them, because I can't even understand and get into their shoes, because I haven't even been in anything similar to this. But with that, we're going to be moving on out of the Odessa area, and I just hope that this poor Odessan man keeps on all of y'all's minds. And you'll also tell people about poor people like this in Ukraine. If they ever sit there and say that supporting Ukraine is pointless or worthless, always bring up people like this, normal people just like us, that are having to go through this and are just suffering emotionally, mentally, and physically because of it. With that, we're now going to be moving out of Odessa, and we're now going to be moving to Snake Island, where we've seen that the Ukrainians and the Russians have joined in operations to try and clear the Snake Island of Russians. Kind of a weird thing. You'd think that the Russians would team up with themselves to fight Ukraine, and the Ukrainians would do the same. But yesterday we saw Russians bombing Snake Island to try and destroy some Russian equipment, and now today we've seen that the Ukrainians have joined in as well, and are also trying to mop up the remainder of the Russian equipment that was left at Snake Island. The Ukrainians, being much more civilized, are of course using Bayraktars instead of any kind of aircraft, as far as we could tell in this video. We can of course see the Bayraktars, very nice looking drone, and now you see some footage of Snake Island. We can now see on this drone footage here a guided bomb slamming into the pier at Snake Island and destroying some of the Russian equipment that had been lined up onto the pier like it was supposed to be loaded onto an oncoming ship that never came, and they only came and picked up the personnel. Those trucks are now burning, and it looks like the Bayraktar drone is looking around in search of more targets, and that explosion was pretty tremendous. I would say it most likely wiped out everything at the pier. Wonderful to see, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians and the Russians can get behind something and work together for once, and that thing that they're working towards is destroying more Russian equipment. Both sides have been doing it, and it's wonderful to know that it appears that Snake Island will be abandoned for the rest of the war, and the curse has finally been lifted as the witch is dead. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Snake Island area, and from that wonderful news, and we're now going to be moving out to Poland to cover some of the news from outside of the country. Starting off in the city of Danzig, now called Dansk. I believe it's called Dansk, not Gdansk. That sounds a little silly. But of course, if anyone knows what it's actually pronounced like, please let me know. But here in the city of Danzig, we've seen that they've renamed one of the parks as the Defenders of Mariupol Square. A nice homage to the Defenders of Mariupol. Of course, right here, you can see Mariupola, and the rest of the words mean Square of the Defenders of Mariupol. We can also see right here a list of figures. Let me see if we can actually read that. Let's see. Vid Pochaki, Oblogi, in Mariupol. Let's see. Beresny 2022. Rossini. So let's see. I'm trying to figure out what these figures mean. Shkil. Sadly, I know how to read, but I don't know what it means. So I'm very sorry about that, y'all. I think these are the casualty figures, perhaps, of what the Russians may have lost in the process. But you can see that they've kind of set up an exhibit in this park about the Defenders of Mariupol and what they went through. You can see that there's actually a lot of pictures and different kinds of little exhibits that they've set up here. And I think that this is a wonderful tribute to the Defenders of Mariupol that, of course, surrendered almost a month. Well, really, 3 weeks. Oh my gosh, I'm getting it all wrong. A month and a half ago. Wanted to make sure I get the figure correct. They actually surrendered on May 17th, and now it is July 2nd. A great tribute by the Polish, who have been huge friends of the Ukrainians since the beginning of this war. And we can see what appears to be a banner on the other side of the road that says "No war, Niet Bonie," which means no. Niet means no in Russian and also Ukrainian, and Bonie, I believe it's the same in Ukrainian and Russian, means war. So wonderful to see that the Polish are giving a great tribute to the defenders of Mariupol. And it looks like on the backside of this exhibit, it looks like they had an individual icon of a person for each casualty that was taken in the defense of the city and also the Russian attack of it. Wonderful homage, of course, and I'm glad to know that they have a friend in Poland. Moving on out of Poland and over across the channel once again to Britain, we have seen today that in Hyde Park, which I've been to Britain before, and I got to tell you, Hyde Park is a really pretty place. And if you ever get to go to Britain, there are things to see, but dodge the tourist traps. That's always a huge recommendation I have whenever you go anywhere, is always dodge the tourist traps. So dodge Buckingham Palace, dodge, some of y'all might be there for that. Don't miss St. Paul's, though. St. Paul's was a sight. But there's a lot of stuff to see in London. Just make sure you miss the big ticket ones like Buckingham Palace, because people wait for hours to get in there, and you can just travel outside of London into a place like Woodstock, where you can go to Blenheim Palace, which is almost 300,000 square feet larger, and I consider more architecturally impressive. That's just an opinion of mine, but I feel like it saves on money, and it also saves on time, and it allows you to see a little bit more of Britain, like the rural countryside. But with that, moving on into Hyde Park, we saw that Guns N' Roses performed there today, and they stood with Ukraine. We see that they had some massive Ukrainian flags flying in their concert, and it's wonderful to know that even Guns N' Roses supports Ukraine. Still, this late into the war. It's been around 4.5 months at this point, and we still see that support is overwhelmingly for Ukraine. So wonderful to see. I hope that this stuff continues on, and it's good to know that Ukraine has a friend in Guns N' Roses, which I've heard one of their songs before, I believe, but, once again, I'm not really into modern music a lot, so I'm not really sure. But with that, that is the end of the news from around the world, and so we're now going to return back to Ukraine, all the way back across the rest of Europe, back to the capital, where we are now going to listen to the speech from the man, the myth, the legend, President Volodymyr Zelensky. And so without further ado, here is the speech of President Zelensky here on the 2nd of July, day 129 of the war.
Бажаю здоров'я. Шановні українці, активно готуємось до початку спеціальної конференції в Лугано в Швейцарії. Перший день в понеділок масштабний міжнародний захід, присвячений відбудові нашої країни, відбудові в широкому сенсі слова. Треба не просто відновити все, що зруйнували окупанти, а створити нову основу для нашого життя, для України. Безпечну, сучасну, зручну, безбар'єрну. Для цього потрібні колосальні інвестиції, мільярди, нові технології, передовий досвід, нові інституції, звичайно, реформи. І ось вже в понеділок Україна представить в Лугано національний погляд, як все це реалізувати. Насправді, це найбільший економічний проєкт в Європі нашого часу і надзвичайні можливості показати себе для кожної держави, для кожної компанії, яких ми запросимо працювати в Україну. Територія 10 областей постраждала від бойових дій після 24 лютого. За цей час вдалося звільнити 1027 міст і селищ. Ще 2610 поки перебувають під російською окупацією, і більшість з них потребують відбудови. Сотні з них російська армія повністю зруйнувала. Їх фактично треба будувати заново. Але окрім цього, десятки міст в інших областях України зазнали ракетних ударів. Сотні підприємств знищені. Серед них є і складні, дуже небезпечні виробництва. Це хімія, це металургія. Звичайно, ми вже почали своїми силами відновлювати нормальне життя у звільнених громадах, територіях, але реалізувати такий масштабний проєкт по всій країні, дати нові стандарти безпеки, перш за все, нову якість життя можна тільки залучивши міжнародні можливості. Тому конференція в Лугано може стати вагомим кроком для відбудови України. І коли ми реалізуємо цей проєкт, я впевнений, що це буде, його відлік буде вестися, можливо, саме з цього заходу. Хоча Належить зробити ще дуже багато для нашої перемоги, і це тяжкий шлях, бо війна продовжується. Але вже зараз треба робити все можливе, щоб агресор програв не тільки на полі бою, а ще й історично, концептуально, щоб кожен в Росії запам'ятав, що Україну не зламати нічим, ніким і навіть жорстокою війною. Сьогодні армія Росії продовжила бити ракетами по наших містах. Тільки станом на вечір було вже 6 ракетних ударів, загалом 12 ракет по Миколаєву, по Донеччині. Продовжились авіаційні удари, жорстокі бойові дії тривають по всій лінії фронту на Донбасі. Епіцентр, звичайно, у містах Луганської області. Посилюється ворожа активність на Харківщині. Вдалося вигнати окупантів з Іванівки Херсонської області. Продовжуємо тиснути на півдні нашої держави. У багатьох тилових містах зараз відчувається розслабленість, але війна не закінчилась, вона є. На жаль, її жорстокість подекуди тільки наростає, і не можна про неї забувати. Тому обов'язково допомагайте армії, допомагайте волонтерам, допомагайте усім, хто залишився наодинці в цей час. І постійно використовуйте, будь ласка, всі свої контакти за кордоном, всі свої інформаційні можливості, навіть просто соціальні мережі, щоб поширювати правду про війну і про злочини окупантів на нашій землі. Завтра, протягом нового тижня, будуть важливі для України переговори, зустрічі, дипломатичну активність не зменшуємо жодного дня. Очікуємо і нових рішень від партнерів щодо оборонної допомоги нашій державі. Головне, як би складно не було нам, сьогодні маємо пам'ятати про те, що буде завтра, і що завтрашній день повинен принести Україні максимальну користь. Кожна мають робити для цього все, абсолютно все, що можливо. Дякуємо усім нашим захисникам, дякую усім нашим захисницям. Ви молодці, міцні. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky here on day 129 of the news. And that, of course, wraps out our news segment for the night. Thank you all so much for watching. If you were here for the news segment only, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We do run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. We always take Mondays off, unless if it's an incredibly special exception, and then if it is, we'll let everyone know in advance. We also upload daily summaries, which have become quite the craze these days. Over the past 4 days, those things have blown up, and people are watching them that have never even seen this channel before. It's really crazy. I don't know why we've changed the title format a little, and now people are flooding in to watch them. And so if you did come in from the summaries, hope you enjoyed those, and I hope you've enjoyed this news segment for the night. With that, of course, this isn't the end of the stream. We're now going to move on into the question segment. But tonight, I'm not really sure if quizzes are going to be done, because while a lot of people are liking the quizzes, I can't really think of any quizzes anymore to do. It's kind of like I've done all the ones I can, and if I was to try and do more, it would be on things I would really know nothing about, like French medieval history, which is something I will definitely say I don't know much of. So with that, we're going to try and get some quizzes, but if I see we've kind of run out, I may run to my second option, which will be some kind of a game that's it's not going to be any game. It's not going to be like Call of Duty or some goofy game like that. It'll most likely be Ostriv, which is a Ukrainian city building game. And of course, that would be a great plug for them, considering they're a Ukrainian game studio and that they've been going through some tough times during this war. But with that, we're now going to move on to the questions segment, and I'm also going to try and pull up a quiz to do here. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So first up for our final question segment, we have a $30 super chat from Praise Adonai, whose alter ego is Bob the Viking. But tonight we have Praise Adonai, who says, Enforcer and Matt, you were right. Yesterday was not my birthday, but I did get 4 happy birthdays. I will save for the real date and send another super chat then. October 21st, I will be 80. Y'all are doing a great job. Thanks, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Praise Adonai, and also congratulations on making it so far in life. That's one thing I wish, both Matthew and me wish for, is to make it to such an old age. Of course, it would be nice. It's nice. Everything's got its positives and negatives. But growing to an old age does seem quite nice. You get to sit back and really look at like your life and its story and how your family has grown up and lived and everything. I think it's actually poetic in a way, like the rest of life. It's just a giant long story that everyone lives through, and I just hope at the end of it all I can sit down and be pretty happy with the story I wrote. So I thank you so much for the support, and I hope you have a wonderful happy 80th birthday when it does come around, and I hope that you saved up all of the little birthday wishes that me and Matthew gave last night along with everyone else in the chat for that birthday, because we're all, of course, going to be rooting for you, and I hope you have a fun one when it does come around. And so thank you once again so much for the support, Bob the Viking, and once again, we're always appreciative of our longtime viewers, and I'm glad you've been around and enjoying the news a lot and helping us to keep on doing it. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and thank you so much once again, Bob the Viking. And with that, we are on to the next. I'm sorry, praise Adonai tonight. I forgot to praise Adonai, but with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Jeff Curtis, who says, with the orc withdrawal from Snake Island, are humanitarian corridors for Ukraine grain shipments on the Black Sea coming closer to reality? Otherwise, a global food catastrophe is sure to occur.
As far as we know, the Ukrainians have already claimed that they've been able to sow some 99% of the ground they still control, and they said that the food crisis, at least in the terms of what will be grown, can be averted. The problem is, of course, like you said, the shipping side of things, and we have seen that the Russians seem to be leaning heavily and have actually made statements towards the fact that they'll be allowing humanitarian ships in to pick up this grain and then ship it off to the Middle East and Africa, so that way these food shortages can be averted. Hopefully that is the case, and I think the Russians are starting to lean in that direction, and it may be a sympathy play to try and have the West lift a few sanctions on them because of their attempt at humanity here in this one instance. So I can agree. Hopefully that does occur, because if not, there's going to be some major traffic situations as everyone tries to figure out how to move this grain throughout the rest of Europe. Of course, everyone on this channel has given brilliant ideas, like using the Danube River and the Rhine to get it. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm having bad hiccups tonight, but move it down the Danube into the Rhine, and then to the ports along the Netherlands, I would suppose, like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and such ports like that. Or it could be taken by train to Poland to then be loaded on at the port of Danzig and then sent out from there. It could also be sent to Romania and Bulgaria, which would be one of the shortest trips the grains could take, loaded into ports like Constanta and Varna, and then shipped off through the Istanbul Strait and the Bosphorus down into the Middle East and Africa then. I'm not really sure how they're going to manage it, but it does seem like the Russians may be helping out a little bit in that instance, and hopefully this potential major food crisis can be averted. And I don't think a lot of people actually understand, because it's become so far removed in modern society, which is insane because it's happened over the course of nearly 120 years. But food is actually stored very little. If we were to stop producing food today and never produce any more, and we had to run off of the food stores we have, the entire world would only have 6 months of food until we all starved. And when you put that into context, it's honestly insane. Only 6 months of stored food. And it's so removed from common people's perspectives that food isn't even an issue. There's no question of where does the food come from, or where will it come from. It's just a question of what are we eating, especially in a lot of first world countries like the European nations and the United States, as well as Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and all the other countries that would be considered first world. No one ever considers how important food is and how important it is that we do not destabilize food production, because if you do, it can lead to disastrous results. Now, I'm going to say one thing for certain. The United States is not going to be affected by this. Neither are a lot of European countries. Most European countries, as well as the United States, get literally nothing from Ukraine in terms of food supplies. In fact, the United States produces so much food in every single category that the government actually pretty much gives out blank checks to farmers for them to destroy crops, so that way we don't overflood our own domestic markets with so many crops and so much food that it becomes worthless and farmers go bankrupt. Y'all wouldn't believe, if you actually look into it, the level of government regulation that goes into food supplies, because they had to do that in the Great Depression to make sure that farmers could actually turn a profit on their produce instead of going bankrupt. We'll get into that later on if everyone's interested. If Matthew would like to start a poll on that, if y'all be interested in hearing about U.S. food production and how that works, it is one of the most interesting things about our country, and it's led to a very interesting food culture. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I highly agree with you. Hopefully, the Russians do lift that blockade and seriously mean it, so we can avert this food crisis. But with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and real quick to just recap this poll before I take it down, I asked the question to the viewers, at this phase of the war, how long do you believe it will continue? It looks like only 3% of you say it'll end in weeks. Most of you think it'll end in months. Exactly 60% of you said that, and 37% says it will end in years. And I have to tend to agree with the majority here. I believe it'll probably end in months. Obviously, nobody can put an exact figure to it. But that is just my opinion. What is your take on that, Enforcer?
I would have to say that they're pretty on par with the idea I have in my head of the percentages I would give to these kind of outcomes. I do not see this war ending in weeks, so I put the lowest percentage towards that. But I do see the war ending in months. That's something that I believe is highly possible. I believe that this may round out by the end of the year. But I can also see it going on for years as well. Although it doesn't seem like it's highly likely, it's possible. And so I would have to say that that poll is pretty representative of what I think inside my head. But if I had to just pick one, I would say it's most likely going to end before the end of this year. And so, great poll, Matthew, by the way. And also, if you could throw up a poll to see if people would be interested in hearing about U.S. food production and stuff, that's something I've always wanted to talk about. We'll probably make a video on it. But if y'all would like to know a little bit of facts and information I know about U.S. food production, it is one of the most interesting things that you'll ever hear. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And I hope that everyone enjoyed the comments on that poll.
All right, and moving on to the next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Ruben Coolidge, who says, thank you guys yet again for bringing us another edition of the news. Hope you guys enjoy your holiday and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support. We are going to enjoy that 4th of July holiday. We only get one day off a week. And you know, one thing that's crazy to me is that people always go over to North Korea, and then they'll sit there and say something like, the workers there work in terrible conditions. They work 60 hours a week, 6 days a week. Or 7. I think most of them work 6, but some of them work 7 days a week nonstop. And then I kind of laugh at that now because I'm like, I'm working those North Korean hours, 60 hours a week, 6 days a week. And so that one day off is an absolute reprieve for me. I get to sit down and not think about this war whatsoever and just enjoy really doing nothing that day for the most part, although sometimes I'm really busy on that day. But I do thank you so much for the support, and we are definitely going to enjoy that 4th of July off. I'm actually going to be reenacting that day, which is going to be a lot, and thank God it's going to be the funnest day ever, because it's the first time I'm doing a Revolutionary War event, and also we're getting a period-accurate meal, which I'm blown away by. So I'll be looking forward to seeing what we're getting and what we're going to be eating. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Phil Tatham, who says, happy 4th of July weekend to my American friends from the UK and, of course, Slava Ukraine.
Now, thank you so much for the support. And it's really crazy how the United States and Britain went from being somewhat indifferent, slightly hostile countries to each other during the War of 1812 and the Revolutionary War near the end of it. A lot of the British public actually became sympathetic to the American cause, which was really interesting if you actually read into the history there. But I have always considered that the British, the Americans, and the French have always had an incredibly special relationship, although it has been strained at times, like the U.S. Civil War was one of those times, and also the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812 were certainly other times. But, of course, I do have a affinity for the British. I really do like their culture. Of course, a lot of my family's culture is British, and, ancestrally, we're almost completely British, so I always enjoy British culture, and I thank you so much for wishing us a happy 4th of July all the way from over there. And we always enjoy everyone giving us the best wishes on our Independence Day, which we always celebrate like there's no tomorrow. Now, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you were on, I think the 4th of July is one of those few holidays in the United States where everyone comes together to celebrate it. It's wonderful, it's fun, and you know, I wish we could invite people from all around the world to join in on it, you know, like come over here and celebrate. But if everyone from around the world came over here, I think we would have a lot of hotel room shortages. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and I'm so glad you gave us some 4th of July wishes all the way from the United Kingdom. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And with that, we actually want to address this poll real quick, because I've seen that 350 votes have come in, and 63% of y'all actually want to know about U.S. food production on stream. I thought it would largely be no, so now I'm going to be held to my word. We'll end that poll so Matthew can throw up a new one. That'll probably be a little bit more interesting than that. But here's a couple of things about U.S. food production. The U.S. government is heavily involved in the regulation of 3 key different kinds of food production: beef, milk, and cheese. It really all revolves around cattle, surprisingly, but it's all beef, milk, and cheese. Milk is one of those most heavily regulated things in the country, unbelievably. Back in the Great Depression, milk was being produced so much compared to the actual demand for milk, that milk was practically worthless. And so a lot of farmers would start literally pouring out milk at the market in front of everyone to try and drive up the prices. And then there was a huge problem because they started to destroy so much milk, and so many farmers just could not sustain business in the milk industry because they were making no money, that the entire milk industry in the United States was about to collapse. And so Franklin Delano Roosevelt stepped in, and he created a massive amount of regulations to make sure that milk production would be profitable, and that these these dairy farmers could remain in business. And so what they did is that they set up milk districts. A lot of y'all may not ever think about this, but if you look at the brands of milk in the United States, there is not a single milk brand. Milk districts USA map. Let's see if we can find a map for this. Here we go. I believe no, these aren't the separate districts. Let me find the correct map here. I'll know it when I see it. But they set up different districts because the milk you get at the store is actually produced within a local district. I think I can't find it right here, I don't think, but there is a specific district map where if you produce milk in a certain area, you must sell it in a certain area. And Central Alabama has one of its own, and also Northern Alabama is in a separate one, which is incredibly interesting. I wish I could find the specific map for it. Let's see. Milk distribution maps. Oh, man, I wish I could find this stuff easily. I'll have to probably try and make a video on this in the future. But milk production is heavily regulated, and also that leads into cheese. A lot of milk that couldn't be sold, or there was like an overproduction of milk, it would get made into cheese. And so then the government started to have this problem where dairy farmers were producing a massive load of cheese, and the government was pretty much duty bound to buy the cheese. And so they had to figure out where to store it. And so they had these massive caves that they had been using for some while for storage, and they decided, well, a lot of them are empty now, and so why not just throw the cheese into the caves? And so the government threw a lot of this cheese that they had bought from the farmers to keep them afloat into these massive caves, and they just started to store the stuff up. And over the years, they just kept on storing up more and more cheese until there was so much cheese and it had been in there for so long, the stuff started to mold and he started running out of room. And so a congressman actually brought this giant moldy block of cheese that had been brought out of one of these caves to Congress, and he was like, look at this cheese, it's literally wasting away in these caves, what do we do? And so Congress came up with a smart idea. They were starting for the first time ever to give out welfare to lower income people. And so they decided, what better way to feed lower income people than with this cheese? We have nothing to do with it. There's really no purpose for it rather than to eat. And there's no way we could really sell this stuff because, you know, what is the United States going to do? Set up the Bureau of Cheese Sales? No. So what they figured out to do was that they would put this in stores and you could buy these with food stamps. You could only get them with food stamps, and you could also get them distributed to you at a food distribution center that was run by the government or some kind of a food bank. And so that became known as government cheese. And the whole entire reason is because of this heavy regulation of the milk, the dairy industry, and trying to keep these milk farmers afloat. That's also why you had the Got Milk mustaches. It's all an interesting story. I think this is the most in-depth story I'll ever tell about the government. But a lot of y'all, because a lot of y'all are much older than me, will remember the milk mustache Got Milk posters that a lot of celebrities would be paid bukus of money to do, and that's because the government was trying to keep the milk industry alive and make it look cool. And so they came up with these milk mustaches, and they would put these on magazines and such things like that to try and encourage people to drink milk. It cost the government tons of money to do this. This was literally funded by the government to try and make people drink more milk. Also, the nutritional pyramids and tables that were made by government institutions heavily suggested drinking milk. And in fact, it was pushed so much that pretty much the only thing you could drink in school during my time was milk. That was the only thing they would sell. They wouldn't sell you water or grape juice or apple juice. It was milk. You got milk or you got nothing. And that was because they're still trying to subsidize and keep milk farmers afloat. And we actually found out later on that these food pyramids were actually heavily skewed on the amount of milk you should be drinking per day. It's way higher than what it is actually healthy as far as we know now. But it was all an attempt to try and get people to ensure that the milk industry would stay afloat. Sadly, milk consumption in the United States keeps on going down per year. But that doesn't stop the government from continuously trying to encourage people to drink milk. And it's a worthy cause. It's keeping a lot of dairy farmers afloat, keeping a lot of people in jobs. And also, I find milk to be delicious. I love milk. Of course, I'm not paid by the government to be supporting milk, but that's kind of the whole story of the heavy regulation of the dairy industry. There's an equally long story for I guess you could say, the beef industry. And then there's a massive story for just normal crop production. The government actually pays farmers to destroy crops so that way the prices can stay stable. Once again, the government could just go in and buy this food and then ship it around the world. And they do that sometimes. But then again, the amount of food that's produced in the United States per year is unbelievable. We produce, I believe, more than half, if not 60%, of the world's food production per year. If anyone was the breadbasket of the world, it's the United States. And so I hope everyone's enjoyed this little aside on the dairy industry and how the U.S. kind of controls the food industry by and large to make sure that farmers don't go bankrupt doing it. But that's also something that a lot of people have talked about recently, and I was wanting to touch on that a little bit, is that apparently a lot of people didn't know the government did that lately, and it finally came to people's attention that farmers got got paid to destroy crops, and it started to cause a little bit of a stir, but that's been going on in the U.S. since the 1930s. And that was something that I was like, they didn't know? But then again, that's something that a lot of people don't know. But anyways, that is that little aside. I know it probably bored Matthew to tears. I hope you all have enjoyed it. But with that, we're going to move on to the question segment again. And I hope you all enjoyed that little story, and I'll probably try and make it into a video in the future. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Captain Chris1220, who says, "Happy Independence Day. I hope we are celebrating a weekend like this with the Ukrainians very soon."
And I thank you so much for the support, and I hope we are enjoying a weekend like this for the Ukrainians as well. When they win this war and sign a peace treaty, I hope that they make that a special national holiday in Ukraine, and I will make sure to celebrate that with them because I've been here through and through with them since the beginning of this war. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. I thank you so much for the support, and also thank you so much for the Independence Day wishes. And with that, we're on to the next question, both on the quiz and in the question segment.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Tim Swenson, who says, "Anyone else notice the Russian border looks like a lion, and the red war line looks like a blood-sucking bat? Earlier in the war, the red line looked more like an angry bird."
What? Let's read that again.
He says, "Anyone else notice the Russian border looks like a lion, and the red war line looks like a blood-sucking bat? Earlier in the war, the red line looked more like an angry bird."
I haven't seen that, sadly. I don't really think the front line looks like a lot to me rather than the front line, but you are a very creative person, and so I'm sure that some people see it. So if you do see that, make sure to respond in the chat, because I would love to know if people are seeing that. But sadly, I just don't see it. But I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the question in a way. But with that, we're going to move on to the next one, both in the quiz and the question segment.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Blue Neptune, who says, Happy New Year to Alabama from Florida. If war comes here, we fight together.
And I do agree. We will fight together. I'm always proud of our boys from Alabama. You know, of course, Alabama's my home state, and so I'm just always proud of Alabama and everything we do. And that's always something I always feel is very important, is that one should always be proud of wherever they come from. It's the people who raised you. You're all on the same team. And while of course I'm an Alabamian, I'm very proud of Alabama. I'm always proud of our country and everything we always strive to do. You know, I would never put anyone down in the United States. Everyone's always out there trying their best. And Alabama has some shining examples of some real fighters from Alabama, like Butterbean. And so with that, Matthew may remember Butterbean as well. He's actually in Jasper, Alabama to this day, and he actually runs a barbecue joint. So if a lot of y'all remember boxing from back in the day, y'all will remember Butterbean. And God bless Butterbean. He was a pretty cool fighter. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for Florida being on our side with Alabama. Alabama and Florida will win the day. And so thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question comes from Kaltenberg, who puts in a $20 super chat and simply says, moo.
And Kaltenberg, moo. I guess you really appreciated the milk board story. Oh, wait a minute. Milk board map. Hang on. Milk board map. I think I may have been able to find it here. I've got to know. I've just got to know. Did I find it? Oh, man, I didn't find it. Dang it, man! I thought that would find it right there. I guess this is the best one that we'd be able to find. These are the state and regional organizations, I suppose, for the milk boards, and so you can see how it's all divided up, where most of your milk will be regionally produced, which is really cool. So I hope that kind of covers it a little bit, and thank you so much for the support, Kaltenberg, and I hope that you have enjoyed the little story about the milk board and U.S. food regulation, and we'll probably try and go into more stories like that in the future. And honestly, I think Matthew can agree with me here. That's about as political as we're ever going to get with U.S. politics, probably, because it's just how the government runs instead of talking about what's going on today. So with that, I thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question. Also, I see a lot of people saying that Butterbean was no joke, and I'm serious. I'm proud of Butterbean, because Butterbean was no joke. Butterbean would rip people apart, and everyone always underestimated him because he never looked like he'd be able to do it. But that man was a living freight train. He would just run people over. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, I have to ask real quick, what got us on the milk topic?
So what got us onto the milk topic was talking about the food production and the food crisis in Ukraine, you know, with the Middle East and Africa. And so then I started talking about that would not affect the United States whatsoever, because we produce so much food, the government has to pay people to destroy it. And so that's what led us into the whole milk topic, which is just one example of the food production side of things, but it is really in depth, everyone. And I think I can make many videos on that. So if you would want to see one of those, do let me know. But with that, hope that answers your question, Matthew, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and moving on, up next, we have a $20 super chat from Rob Bertram, who says, Hey, you guys, just want to let you know I found your stream on day 3 or 4 and have watched every night since. Because I watch your stream on my TV, I've never commented. I just watch and enjoy. Slava Ukraine. And Rob, you must be watching from your phone tonight because you are typing to us, so welcome to the stream once more.
Well, thank you so much once again, Rob, for watching the stream. Oh, of course, we're always appreciative that you have been watching, and for a long time. You came in with our first wave of people at some 1.6 thousand subscribers, which is what we had on day 4. And so I hope you've been enjoying it ever since, and you've been here watching this army grow day in and day out. And I haven't been more proud of the Lee Spring Army and all of the viewers who make it up. And I hope you have been enjoying it tonight, and it's good to hear from you. And there's a lot of viewers out there who are apparently watching it like this. And just for those of y'all to know, We have taken off the slow chat restrictions tonight because we are wanting to encourage people to, of course, talk to each other and stuff. Because with the 30-second delay on, we started to see that people just talk less and less, and we don't want people to feel like we're trying to discourage people from talking in the live chat. In fact, we would love for people to talk in the live chat as long as you're not trolling or anything. So with that, thank you all. Thank you once again for the support, Rob. I hope you've been enjoying the stream tonight, and thank you for being a long-term veteran of the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right. And up next, we have a $17 super chat from Andrew J., who does not leave a comment. Thank you very much, Andrew, for your support. And here's what I'm going to do for you. Yeehaw! And I hope that works.
Through. Yeah, it went through. That was crazy.
It did?
Yeah, we heard the whole thing. How did you do that?
Good. I just sort of like turned away from the mic a little bit. Was it still pretty loud?
No, it wasn't too loud. I could hear it perfectly. That was crazy, man.
Oh, well, there we go. That's how I got to do it from now on. And I guess, well, I won't do that because if I were to go yeehaw on every single chat that didn't leave a comment, people would start losing their minds. So I won't do that. But thank you very much for the support, Andrew. We appreciate you very much. And moving on, we have a $17 super chat from Not a Channel, who says, "I got a good chuckle from your Canadian accent yesterday, and yes, we really do say eh. Thanks as always for your work, and Slava Ukraine, eh?"
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and also I hope you enjoyed my Canadian. I don't know if I can do it today. I don't know what got me in the zone to do it yesterday. But I hope you did enjoy it. I always love doing accents and little impressions and stuff like that. I do them to the point. Sometimes I annoy my own mother doing that. So with that, I hope you did enjoy it, and also it is really cool to know that y'all do say "eh" a lot. So thank you very much for the support, eh. And we're always appreciative of our Canadian brothers and sisters who are always up there and always supporting us, just like the United States of America. And so thank you once again for the support, E. I don't know if that's a Saskatchewan accent or a British Columbia accent, and it's kind of becoming a little bit more Irish now because that's kind of what I've been basing it off of. But I thank you once again for the support, and we're now going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $100 donation from Steve2848, who says, "I drink a lot of milk with a lot of Kahlua and vodka. That is normally called a White Russian, but I think I'll rename it a Slava Ukraine."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Steve. And it is really weird to hear that apparently milk and alcohol go together. I don't know if that... Matthew, does that sound good to you?
Milk and alcohol does not sound like it goes together at all.
I mean, like, eventually I will probably try that. Of course, Matthew and me don't really drink, and I don't really have a huge inclination to drink, but just because you stated that combination, I'm now intrigued as to what that would taste like. So I will probably try that in a year's time when I'm able to drink. But I do thank you very much for the support. And also, kind of a weird name that's called White Russian. Now I can see why you are renaming it. Maybe you should call it... let's think of a good name for that. Let's see. It's got vodka in it. It's got milk and Kahlua. Kahlua. I don't know what Kahlua is, but we will call it on this stream a Ukrainian Spring. Maybe. I think that would be a pretty good name for it. It was pretty snowy in Ukraine spring this year, so maybe we'll call it a Ukrainian Spring. But with that, I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Steve2848. You are always throwing in massive support. We're always greatly appreciative of you being here, first of all, and of course, helping this channel to keep on running. And so thank you once again. It does mean a lot to us. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And moving on, we now have a $20 super chat from Captain Chris1220, who says, "I need another yeehaw." And guess what, Chris? Yeehaw! And I think the mic cut out on that one.
It did. It kind of did. But I hope
you kind of got a yeehaw.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, that Matthew's probably going to be hoarse tomorrow from doing all these. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And thank you so much for the support.
All right. And moving on next, we have a $10 super chat from Mr. Lunchtime, who says, "Azov soldier been tortured daily, getting finder cut off, women stripped naked, and have them stand all day with hands up while Russians torture. Yahoo News from recently liberated soldiers. Thanks, guys."
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it is a terrible fact that the Russians are most likely, if not definitely, torturing a lot of the prisoners of war that they've been taking, and especially the Azov, since the Russian government has literally been building a personal vendetta against them and making sure that the Russian people feel like they are being pitted directly against that one unit in particular. So I hate to think about that, but hopefully the Ukrainians can manage to get all of them released, and there's not really much more than that. I mean, like, it's just an unfortunate fact that's happening, and it just is what it is. But I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that the Ukrainians are able to get a lot of the Azov soldiers out of there first, because I know if anyone's getting tortured, it's especially them. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Suzanne B, who says, "This is for the DDoS Execution Fund."
And I thank you so much for the support. And we have been executing those DDoS attacks. We've won against almost 9 of them at this point, I believe. And we'll continue to keep on winning against them. I'm sure we're about to get throttled down to 0 here in a minute and then get thrown right back on. But no matter what the bots are doing, they cannot stop the Enforcer and they cannot stop the Lee Spring Army, no matter what. And so I thank you once again so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you so much for supporting the anti-DDoS, anti-bot fund. With that, we're going to move on to the next question, but before we do, some of y'all may be seeing that I'm answering a lot of these amendment questions correct as far as the U.S. Constitution is concerned. And one thing that's very important to remember is that the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, were all ratified at the exact same time, which was the correction. Yeah, you just heard me drop that screwdriver, Matthew. But it was the early 1800s when all of the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, were adopted. Beyond that, you can actually get an idea historically of what amendment number it will be based off of when these events happened. So if it's the 1860s, you're going to be looking at the early 10s. If it's somewhere around the late 1800s, you're going to be looking at the later 10s. Lower 20s will be the early 20th century, and the higher 20s will be the late 20th century and also the 2000s. So that's kind of how I'm answering them correctly. The First Amendment, of course, is the answer to that one. But moving on to the next one, okay, that's the Fourth Amendment. All right, these were all ratified at the same time. That's the Fifth Amendment. Okay, one second. Imposing poll taxes, I believe that would be the 24th Amendment. Yeah, see, it's the 1960s, so you're starting to look at those mid-20s, higher 20s, and so you can just guesstimate which number they are when given these options just based off of the time in history that event happened. But with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from That Frost Wolf, who says, "Thank Neptune, the Ruski bear lost its starfish. Eyeglasses on Snake Island. Since the 4th is 2 days away, what war do you think is most similar to Ukraine's war? Enjoy s'mores sprinkled coffees on me."
Well, I thank you so much for the support and the s'more sprinkled coffees. And to answer that question, I think that the war that's closest to the Ukraine war, and I've said this multiple times, and I'm still sticking to my guns on this one, is the Finnish Winter War of 1939. It's the closest one to it and how it's gone. Of course, in length now, the Ukraine war is a decent bit longer, but the Finnish Winter War, while being shorter, had the exact same shortcomings that the Russians had there. Poor logistics, poor training, poor communications, poor coordination, and then a strong defense by a much smaller military that was doubted. Its capabilities were doubted before the war began. So in that regard, I would say that it's very similar to the Finnish Winter War. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And moving on, we now have a $10 super chat from Eric Carrington, who does not leave a comment. So thank you very much, Eric, for the support. And with that being said, we are moving on to the next one. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Jay Bagwell, who says, "The airburst 155mm round was most likely a German Smart. It detonates above armored vehicles and has 2 sub-munitions that use explosively formed projectiles similar to a heat round."
Interesting. I did not know that, and I thank you so much for imparting that on us. Let's pull up the Smart Round. Smart Round. How many super chats do we have left, by the way, Matthew?
Let's see here. We have looks like about 18 left.
Oh, goodness. We're going to have to make sure to speed these up then so that way I don't hold everyone here for the night. But it is a round that's apparently used by the Brits, the Germans, the Swiss, cool, really cool, the Greeks, and the Australians. And it does look like it does exactly what you say. And so I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question just for the sake of time. But I thank you very much for sharing that information with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Jungle Jim AB9AB, who says, in your assessment, will Putin declare victory now that Lysychansk appears to have fallen? Or is his troops complete an encirclement of the area?
I believe they're going to continue to try and complete an encirclement of the area. Well, you got to remember that they claimed that they wanted the entirety of the Donbass, which includes both Donetsk and Luhansk, and with the capture of Lysychansk, they'll only be rounding out the complete capture of the Luhansk Oblast, and there will still be half of the Donetsk Oblast left. So I believe they'll continue on for quite some while. But that's just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. But I thank you very much for the support. I hope that answers the question, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, it would be interesting to see how Ukraine would manage the recovered territories, and happy 4th of July. Take 10.
And I thank you very much for the support and also the 4th of July wishes. And to answer that question, well, answer the comment, it will be very interesting to see how they manage these once controlled areas of Ukraine. I believe that the areas that were part of Ukraine before the war will just go back to status quo. I'm sure there will be some extra police efforts in that area for some while, but by and large, it will remain the same. If the Ukrainians are able to get Crimea and the DPR and LPR, however, that may be an entirely different story. Because for around 8 years, both Crimea and the Donetsk and Luhansk area has not had direct control by the Ukrainian government. So they'll probably have to do something very similar to like the U.S. reconstruction after the Civil War. But we'll just have to wait and see if that is what happens. So with that, thank you very much for the support. And I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Fernando Silva, who does not leave a comment. So thank you very much for your support. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Blue Neptune, who says, it's cool that the older brother calls out the younger brother sometimes. And I really didn't call him out. I was just kind of curious how the milk conversation started because I kind of missed the first part of it. But yeah, I was really curious and it was good to know.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, it's not necessarily a calling out. I think he's actually just, like you said, really inquisitive and curious as to how the stream goes from the war to milk production, which is kind of a weird turn. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and just a second here while I catch back up. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Mike D, who says, while we celebrate our 4th, let's raise a glass to the ones fighting for theirs. Viva la Ukraine and Viva la Liberty.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I can entirely agree as well that on the 4th of July, we should, of course, cheer on the Ukrainians who will eventually be able to have a holiday much like ours where they can declare victory over what was to soon be their oppressors. Well, you know, if you look at the American revolutionary history, it's highly questionable if the British really were oppressors or not. My answer is actually no. There wasn't really a lot that they did to oppress the Americans, and the Boston Massacre was like the least, and there's this a commonly repeated line, and I'll have to agree with it. It was the least massacres in all of history. Only like 3 people died, and everyone that got shot was just throwing clubs and rocks at the British soldiers. So their response seemed a little appropriate. But in that, I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you once again for the support. And I do agree that hopefully the Ukrainians will also have a 4th of July of their own here soon. And of course, massive respect to the soldiers who are currently fighting for their ability to hopefully have one here soon. And so with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have an $8 donation from Nigel Curtis, who says, enforcers, are you worried like I am that mainstream news has pretty much totally stopped reporting on Ukraine? Here is Australia anyways.
I do feel a little bit concerned about that, but at the same time, I'm glad that they don't, because it makes interested people who want to hear about the war in Ukraine come here to YouTube and around the internet to try and find more reliable sources of information rather than what they find on the news. And so while it is a little concerning, I'm kind of glad that they're not covering it because I don't have high regards for mainstream news. They're full of fake information just all over the board, no matter what news group you go to. Every single one of them's peddling an agenda, peddling fake information, and just completely lying usually about the situation. And also, they're well behind on the news. They're almost 3 or 4 days behind. So with that, I hope that does address the question. And I thank you once again for the support. As long as people on the by and large remain interested in it, it doesn't matter if the mainstream news covers it or not. It just matters if people are still very vocal for their support of Ukraine. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $6 super chat from Brian Cave, who says, "Oops, I forgot to add a side salad. Great job, guys."
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And of course, we will enjoy that side salad as well. If that is to accompany a pizza, I don't know if a side salad is the best side for a pizza, but we will still take it. I'm honestly a sushi and pizza kind of person in that regard. But with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again for the side salad.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Lucychansk, who says, "All of the M777A2 airburst I've shot were HE time fused, timed mathematically, determined by an FDC officer. We called them Killer Juniors."
Well, I thank you so much for the support and also the little tidbit of information there. That's actually really cool to hear. We didn't actually know the specific name, but it's good to know that they're called Killer Juniors. We actually know a guy named Junior. But with that, I thank you once again for the support and sharing that information with everyone here. Of course, I love it when people do add in some interesting stories that they have from their own experience because it always adds a lot to the stream and the information we're able to give out. So thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and moving on, we have a $5 super chat from Eric Carrington once again. And thank you very much for your continued support, Eric. It is much appreciated. Eric says, "In memory of fallen servicemen, Benji Foreign Legion, UN Falklands War, Stewart U.S. Marines, Carroll Fleet Air Arm, and Carleton Captain, Royal Navy, rest in peace."
Could you reread that one real quick for me?
Yes, Eric says, "In memory of fallen servicemen, Benji Foreign Legion, UN Falklands War, Stewart U.S. Marines, Carroll Fleet Air Arm, and Carleton Captain, Royal Navy, rest in peace."
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I now just understood what you were talking about, which was the names of the people and where they formerly served. And of course, there are Foreign Legion members that have been dying in Ukraine in smaller numbers that we know of, but still, they are dying for a country that isn't even theirs, and they're just there for believing in the cause. And that's a very very honorable thing for them to do. No one's, of course, forced them to go there and fight, and they're doing it entirely off of their belief that Ukraine should remain a free and independent nation. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and also for naming off some of the names of these great people who have, of course, laid down their lives in something they believe in. And so with that, I'm going to move on to the next question, and thank you so much for the support and bringing up the names of some of these incredible people. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Detroit Micro Sound, who says, "2 SUs could have been in the Black Sea today if a NASAMS battery had been put in place on Snake Island as soon as the orcs left the other day."
That is true. That could have been something that most likely could have been done. And also on top of that, the NASAMS can shoot at both cruise missiles, aircraft, and pretty much everything else. And so in that instance, that's actually a really solid system when you think about it. That could be used to allow Neptune anti-ship batteries onto the island. It seems pretty capable as far as we know on paper, but we haven't seen it in practice yet. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I would agree that if it could be put there safely, that could have made sure that Russians weren't able to operate as safely in the Black Sea as normal. But then again, those things only reach out to 18 miles, and so it'd be an 18-mile circle, which is only this big in the Black Sea, in a big circle like that, that it would have protected. So a large amount of the Black Sea, pretty much the remaining 100 miles of it would pretty much still be wide open. But with that, I thank you so much for the support and also for providing that little comment there, because I do believe that would be true to an extent. And with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and up next, I want to recognize a few super chats here without comments. Up first, we have a $4 super chat from Junebug with the 72 on the end. Then we have a $2 super chat from Smog, Junebug without the 72 on the end. And we also have a $1 super chat from one of our Discord people, Zach Jeffers. So thank you very much to all 4 of you for your support, and thank you for watching the channel as always. So up next, we have a $5 super chat from Heather Fitzgibbon, who simply says, Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini. And I thank you so much once again for the support, as it does help us to keep on continuing this channel, the Sunday fundraisers, and our daily summaries of the news. And so thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $3 super chat from Luke Mitchell, who says, winter is coming. Only another 3 months. How bad would this be for Russia if the war continues that long? Glory to Ukraine.
It's going to be very bad for the Russians when this war continues on. The Russians are the Russians, once the next Rasputitsa season comes around, they're going to be forced back onto the paved roads, and the paved roads mean death for Russian units. We can see that a large amount of them now that are being destroyed are actually on dirt paths that are near fields and such things, and it allows for their units to spread out into their normal formations. But when Rasputitsa season comes around, the ground everywhere becomes unusable except for on the roads, the paved roads, and there's very few of them. And so the Russians are going to be relegated to those. The Ukrainians are going to pick them off like fish in a barrel, and the Russians are going to be taking massive amounts of losses and still gaining these small amounts of ground, or even losing ground at that point like they are right now. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. If winter does come, it's going to be very bad for the Russians. It's almost going to be unstatable how bad the casualty reports are most likely going to be at that point. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Lurch Eyebold, who says, question, what should you never do on a date? Answer, Russia.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I can't agree. That is definitely something you don't want to do on a date, is Russian. And so with that, I thank you once again for the support. Great joke, by the way. It almost took me a second to catch on to it, but then it like clicked immediately. So thank you once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Detroit Micro Sound, who says, load Ukraine with NASAMS and HIMARS. Russia, bye.
Can you read that again?
He says, load Ukraine with NASAMS and HIMARS. Russia, bye.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. I was like, the Russia bye part like threw me off. I was collecting my response to it, and then I just heard Matthew go, Russia bye, and I was like, what? But anyways, yes, that is a pretty good idea. If we could get every single city in Ukraine with some NASAMS around them with an 18-mile range, they would have a pretty good little detection radius around each city that would be able to shoot down incoming cruise missiles, and so the cities would no longer be hit. If they could also get more HIMARS, which have a range of 50 miles, which from the front line looks something like that. When you put that into perspective, that's a pretty long range. But a range of 50 miles, you would definitely be beating Russian units back to the border. And so with that, I can't agree. NASAMS and HIMARS may be the way to victory. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from CA Lags, who says, which cities would you deploy NASAMS?
The cities I would deploy SAMs to would be the easternmost cities, and so that would be Kharkiv, Kramatorsk, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, Kryvyi Rih, and of course Kyiv. I believe those would be the primary cities just because of the population centers there. Of course, if it was possible, I would try and have some put in Chernihiv as well. Sumy hasn't been hit by anything as far as I know, and so I wouldn't give them one, although they're incredibly close to the front lines. But I would pick the largest population centers to protect, because usually those have the most strategic targets in them and also the highest populations that could be hit and killed by missile attacks. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Tim Childs, who says, as above in the comments, hello from New Zealand. All the best for U.S. Independence Day, guys. It's my first super chat. Slava Ukraine. And hello from the good old US of A to you over there in New Zealand. And thank you for supporting the channel very much.
And also, Tim, hello from the USA to New Zealand as well. Heard a lot of good things about New Zealand. Never been there though, but I would like to go there someday. It's a nice looking place. They also filmed, I think, The Hobbit there. I watched that movie once. And the only thing that struck me as really cool about the movie was the landscape they were in, which of course was New Zealand. So very beautiful country as far as I know. And maybe one day I'll be able to go down there and see it for myself. But to address the next part of that question, let's see. First, super chat, totally fine, totally cool. We're perfectly fine with that. We're just glad that we get support and we're able to keep this thing running. So thank you once again for the support, Tim. And it's glad to hear that we have Lee Spring Army soldiers, a load of them from Australia and New Zealand. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support, Tim. And with that, on to the next one.
All right, and just to let everybody know, we just have 3 more super chats until we get to our live chat questions. We have a ton of live chat questions tonight. Hopefully we can get to quite a few of them. But moving on to the next super chat, we have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says Russia and Ukraine also supply fertilizer.
That's very true. That's also the reason why there's so many nitric acid tanks in Ukraine, is because they're big fertilizer producers, and that's also because they're one of the main agricultural bread baskets of the world as well. A brasket. That's like if someone has a really bad Southern drawl and they're trying to say brisket, you want some brasket. But with that, that is true. They are both major producers of fertilizer. Yeah, I'm totally falling apart speech-wise now. But they are major producers of fertilizer, and that is something to keep in note as well. And so with that, I hope that does address the question, well, the comment, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Detroit Micro Sound, once more, who says, NASAMS give Russia nightmares about flying kites.
That's very true, and I think that if the U.S. gives Ukraine more than 2, I think the Russians are going to be in for some very bad times in trying to attack anything in Ukraine anymore, especially if they lined up those NASAMS across Kryvyi Rih. Let me see here. Oh, you could set some up in Mykolaiv, which would protect the city and then also reach out 18 miles in this direction. Some in Kryvyi Rih and some in Odesa, and you would almost create this net that would be able to catch all the cruise and ballistic missiles that would be fired from the Black Sea deeper into the country. So that would actually, if they could get enough NASAMS, they could actually create a decent protective defense against cruise ballistic missiles and all sorts of things, and it will make the Russians scared to fly anything, even a kite. So with that, thank you so much for the support once again, and also that super chat, because that made me think about this area down here, and that would be a wonderful thing for the Ukrainians to do. And with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you so much for the support.
All right, and this is our last super chat of the night until we get to our live chat questions. So this one is from Sea Dog Pirate, who puts in a $2 donation and says, y'all have to visit Pensacola for a bushwhacker. And I have no idea what a bushwhacker is, but thank you very much for the support.
And also, I've been to Pensacola several times, but I still have no idea what a bushwhacker is, but I thank you very much for the support. We will look into having a bushwhacker. Let's type that in. What is a bushwhacker? Drink. I think he's talking about a bushwhacker drink. It's a cocktail invented in 1975 at the Ship Store Sapphire Pub at Sapphire Village in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. It is similar to a creamy chocolate pina colada. Wow, it looks like a milkshake. But we might try one of those. It actually, what the hell? It just ran up on a drink down here called Orgasm.
Oh my goodness!
All right. Looks like the cam bot's trying to throw in some subliminal advertising here in the drink section. But thank you very much for the support, and maybe we'll try one of those. We're definitely not going to try the other one. I think that one's not really family friendly, but we will try out the bushwhacker with you. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And we've reached the end of the super chats for the night. We're now going to answer 4 or 5 live chat questions, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, what is the first one?
All right, so up first, we have a question from Gabby B, who says, did you hear about Russia being hit by 3 separate assassination attempts? One was killed in Kherson.
I did not hear that. I'm not really sure if I can confirm or deny that news just because I have a lack of information there, but I wouldn't doubt it. We've seen a lot of partisan attacks occurring recently, and so one would assume that some of those attacks would be assassinations as well. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, some North Old West guy, or actually, correction, some Northwest guy. My bad. It's actually some Northwest guy says, what do you think about supplying Ukraine with old school, like canvas wing aircraft, kind of cheap drones, but manned?
I think that's suicide. What you're talking about is a World War I biplane, man. Like, imagine giving them a Sopwith Camel like this and using that on the front line. I hate to say it, I always love to not burst people's bubbles, but giving them a canvas coated plane like a drone but manned would be this, and they would die. You could light this thing up with a PKP machine gun and take it out of the sky. So I don't necessarily think that's a great idea. But who knows? That might be something they might try and do, although I'm very certain that it's not. So I thank you for the question. I hope that does answer it. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have one more super chat to address. This one is from Eric Carrington once again, who puts in a $5 donation and says, Kahlua, coffee liquor, vodka, and milk equals by Rocktar equals small, plentiful, effective. Glory to Ukraine, and cheers.
And thank you for the support. And that's actually a pretty good name for that as well. I think that's a better name than White Russian, that's for sure. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, Eric. Also in pounds. I always find the pound symbol really neat. I think it's cooler than the dollar sign. What do you think about that, Matthew?
Say that one more time.
Do you think the pound symbol is cooler than the dollar sign?
Oh yeah, totally, for sure. Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now. Yeah, I would say definitely.
Yeah, I honestly like the pound sign, really. Let us know what you think in the comments. Like, what is the coolest currency symbol to y'all in the world? Is it British pounds? Is it euros? Is it rubles? Is it rupees? Is it yen? Is it dollars? You know, let us know, because I honestly think that the pound symbol, not like the pound symbol on the phone dial-up, but the pound currency symbol is probably one of the cooler ones out there. But with that, thank you so much for the support, Eric. I hope that did address the comment. And with that, we're on to 3 more questions from the live chat.
All right, and up next, we have a question from the Beezer, who says, I've been wondering how Ukrainians handle body disposal of Russian troops. Do you guys have any information?
How Ukrainians dispose of Russians?
Correct.
The Ukrainians dispose of Russians usually by throwing them in body bags and either burying them in mass graves that are labeled, or they throw them in refrigerator cars. I think that they're honestly running out of room in refrigerator cars, and it's also wasting up a lot of valuable resources. And so I think at this point, as far as I know, they're actually just throwing them into mass graves and identifying who's who the best they can, and then they'll probably exhume them at the end of the war and try and send them back to Russia. So with that, and once again, that's based off an assumption, the part about mass graves. I'm not really sure about that yet, but we do know about the refrigerator cars, and that's really the only way we know of them dealing with dead Russians. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Get Over Yourself, who says, Enforcer, how awesome would it be to have Ukraine military make a 4th of July video for us using only American weapons taking out Russian tanks? And the finale would be downing a helicopter. Go Ukraine, as always.
Well, first off, I think you ought to get over yourself. I'm just kidding with you, but I think that would actually be a very nice little thing for them to do. I don't know if they would do it, but if they definitely came up with the time to do something like that, I would be very proud of Ukraine, and also it made me proud of the United States for providing those kinds of weapons and also developing them in the first place. And I honestly think that'd be a great homage to American support during this war, and also showing that the Ukrainians are doing an incredibly competent job and great work on the Russians with American equipment. And so I think that'd be wonderful, really. And so with that, I thank you so much for the question. I hope that does answer it, at least in my opinion. And with that, we're going to move on to the last question of the night, and then we're going to round out the stream. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in a question?
And before we get to that lucky person, We have one more super chat that just came in from Gary Robbins. He puts in a $10 super chat. So thank you very much, Gary, for your continued support of the channel. We appreciate you very much, and we appreciate all of our donors very much as well. So, up next, the last question of the night goes to Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, what did Turkey get in return for supporting the admission of Finland and Sweden into NATO?
We don't really know. That's actually something that I've been wondering about too, and I'm glad that you asked that question because I haven't found an answer for it. And I've been desperately searching for one because I know that the Turks didn't hold out this long for nothing. They obviously got something out of it, but no one's been, as far as I know, no one's been able to tell what that is. So of course we'll be waiting to try and find some answer to that, but sadly I feel like it's going to be coming out probably a decade after this war when it doesn't really matter, and then they'll say, oh, you know, Turkey did this, because a lot of people didn't know this at the time when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, but the United States actually made an agreement with the Russians that they would remove nuclear weapons from Turkey. Coincidence? and in return, the Soviets would remove nuclear weapons from Cuba. And a lot of people didn't know that until many years later when it came out that that was how we got the Soviets to take the nuclear weapons out of Cuba. So with that, I hope that kind of answers the question. I don't think we're going to get an answer to that for some while. And so with that, we have now rounded out the last question of the night, and I hope I answered that fairly well. And so we have one last super chat from Sick Lid. What a sick lid for $1.99. And I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you all so much for asking wonderful questions tonight, and of course watching the news. A lot of people tonight. I will say our viewership was a little low, but of course, that's totally understandable. A lot of our Lee Spring Army is out enjoying the 4th of July weekend, and I can't blame them. It's a wonderful weekend. Hopefully the weather will be great, and hopefully everyone can go outside and enjoy time with their families, time watching the fireworks shows, and just doing anything and everything y'all could imagine to celebrate Independence Day. Also, to the rest of my viewers around the world who aren't American, I hope y'all have a fun time too. I know the 4th of July is just another day for most of y'all, but to the United States, it is a day worth celebrating, and so I hope y'all find something on the 4th of July to be happy for and celebrate too. And with that, we've now reached the end of the stream for the night. I thank you all so much for watching once again. If y'all did enjoy, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We do run these streams every single day of the week from Monday to, well, not Monday, from Tuesday to Sunday, except for Mondays. We take Mondays off in every regard. There's no summaries or live streams that go up on Monday. So I thank you all once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow for the Sunday night fundraiser. Thank you all so much once again, and take care.